Hey, it's Brooklyn Lou the Skeptic. I'm a former evangelical Christian, been an atheist for about the last 13 years, and I'm very happy as an atheist. This particular stream, I'm trying to see if anyone wants to talk about their deconversion out of Christianity or out of any other religion. For me, it's been a wonderful journey. It's been one where I have learned to enjoy life much greater than I had in the past. All right. My journey has been one of self-discovery, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I'm going to put in a link and hang out and see if anybody wants to talk today. And if you want to talk about something else, that's always fine. I like to open up my channel to freedom of expression, open dialogue. And if you want to chat with each other in the stream, that's fine. Or if you want to come on the stage and talk direct to a skeptic, Brooklyn Lou the Skeptic, that's me. And I welcome you all in. I hope you are having a wonderful evening. And let's talk. So my journey out of Christianity began probably about 16 years ago. And I started questioning the things I believed. As I did that, I came to understand that a lot of the things I believed were simply false. They were not true. And it was very difficult to leave this belief system because it was part of who I was at the time. It was a big part of my identity as a human being. So leaving that was incredibly difficult. But I did. I decided to be true to myself. I decided to be real with myself. And I decided to trust myself. And in that, I left my belief system and opened up a whole new world of possibilities. I started doing things that I never did before. I started thinking of things differently. And I started prioritizing a good life. I don't think that life goes on and on and on. I don't believe in the hereafter. And I want to make the absolute best of the time I have here on earth. So my journey has been one of self-discovery, having a whole lot of fun, enjoying life, and trying to become a better person. And I truly believe I'm a better person now that I left Christianity, and I've developed into a better person than I was in the past when I was a believer in this faith. And I would love to hear anybody else's journey. What was it like for you to leave Christianity or any other religion? Was it difficult? Was it worth it? And how do you feel today after having left Christianity? Those are some of the things I hope to talk about today. I'm going to step away for a moment. I will be right back. I have to grab a phone that I hear going off, and I'm expecting something important. So I'll be right back in a moment. You can join the stream at the link. Comment in the stream comments. I'll see them. And we can open this up, and I'll hang out a while to see if anybody wants to talk in person. Be right back. Oh, right. I got my phone. I'm going to put it next to me so that if anything vital comes in, I'll hear it. Hey, Dark Light, how are you? Glad to see you here. I hope you're happy tonight. Hope things are going well for you, Dark Light. Really appreciate you coming by. So, faith. It didn't serve me well. Faith was not something that helped me to become a better person. Faith, for the most part, in a religious sense, means believing things that may not necessarily be true. That's what we have when we talk about faith. Faith is people claiming they know things that they simply don't know. And faith is a way to hide yourself from the difficult questions. Because if you just believe something without questioning it, that's pretty much what faith is. It's believing things without evidence. And faith doesn't lead you to truth. Faith can prevent you from understanding truth because you put up a block, a wall, and your mind becomes blocked in and cornered in like you're in a box. When I left faith, my mind was free. I became much more self-actualized. In fact, that became a part of my journey. After I left belief in God, I decided to look at myself and I decided to trust myself. And one of the first journeys I went on was a journey into psychology. One of the first people I started studying was Abraham Maslow, the famous humanist psychologist. And he's famous for having the hierarchy of needs. And at the top of that hierarchy of needs is self-actualization. And becoming self-actualized became a goal. And I sought it. And I started seeking mental stability and self-confidence and self-awareness. And shoot, being self-actualized is far better than being enlightened by some invisible entity that really doesn't exist. Because make-believe can only go so far. And I don't want anything to do with make-believe anymore. I want to live in the real world, in reality. And yes, I could drift off into imaginary things, and I can be creative, and I can even imagine things, and it make me feel better. It could make me feel better. But I always want to distinguish what is real from what is imaginary. And unfortunately, when you get caught up in the religious box of faith, you no longer can distinguish what is real from what is imaginary. And in psychological terms, it's not a good place to be. So, my goal is to keep my mind stable and to be helpful to other human beings, to become a better person and enjoy life to the absolute fullest, each and every day living in the moment. And that has enabled me to be a much happier and better person than I ever was when I was a faithful, true believer in Christianity. I would love to hear other people's stories, how leaving religion was for you. That's what this stream is about. But as always, any topic is good. And that's because I love to talk to people and find out what their life is about and what makes their life better and what has helped them become a better person. I want to hear about it. Some people tell me it doesn't matter if Christianity is true, that it means nothing to them, that the point is that they have faith, and that faith, whether it be true or not, is helping them negotiate the world. And for those people, I say, that's okay for you. Maybe you have to use your imagination to create something in your own mind that settles it. And if that's the case, fine. At least you recognize that it may not necessarily be true. But I'll tell you what, when I talk to hardened Christians who literally believe every word of the Bible, and they take it literally, and that becomes the foundation of their whole life, I simply don't understand it anymore. It doesn't make sense to me anymore. So, again, anyone wants to talk about where they used to be and where they've gotten to and how leaving religion impacted their own lives. Could be for the better, could be for the worse. I want to hear it all. So here's there we go. That is the stream, if anyone wants to come in and talk. Topic: did you leave religion? And if so, how has your life changed since leaving religion? Was it a net positive or a net negative? Hey, Dark, I hear you with that microphone. I've been actually talking to a few people where their microphones are messed up. The microphone I'm using is only $30 from Walmart. Looks like this. Not a big deal, but seems to do the trick. And that's brand new, $30. One day, I'm going to invest and get a better one. I also want to get a better setup for video outside of the home, because every video I do is in my little man cave. I'd like to find the ability to get camera and microphone that I can carry with me outside, kind of walk and talk type stuff. And that's one of the goals of the channel. If anyone ever wants to help me get there, you can buy me a coffee. I put a link up in the chat. And of course, super chats are always available. And I want to grow this channel and bring people along for the ride. I want to be in it for the long haul, not short term. I'm getting up there in age. I'm going to be 63 next month. But I'd like to continue on and do this as long as I can. Hey, Robert, I see you there.
How's it going, Lou?
Hey, Robert, how you doing today?
Quite well, man.
Good.
Yeah, I was back and forward on what type of mic setup when I first decided I was going to get into this, whether I was going to do something like a boom mic and just do kind of this caved setting, or whether I was going to get something like a mic that could clip on my shirt or whatnot, and I could be out and about with a camera that is either a pole camera or something. But I decided to I wound up getting a good high resolution camera that was like a PC mount and got a good boom mic and just went that direction instead. But I just think as far as doing interviews and talking with people, and if it is your goal to have the social interaction, it's probably easier to go this direction than like walk and talk kind of thing. But yeah, I've ran into some situations like I've done a YouTube video with the Causeway Bridge and talking about flat earthers and just trying to shoot the Causeway Bridge. And when you run into something like that, you think back, dude, it really would have been good to went the other direction and have a really good camera so you can show this and talk and whatnot. So let me catch this one. It's work related and I'm off work.
Yeah. So I know you've been doing some videos, and I think you're a very, very important person in this kind of skeptic community, bringing your understanding of philosophy into the equation.
I'm not formally educated in philosophy. I've become attracted to philosophy just because I tried to get into a subject more than religion. So, and I wound up reading some philosophy. This was years ago. I actually read a book of Bertrand Russell's, which first got me into the subject, The Problem of Philosophy. And then it just, like you come out of church and you realize that you're wrong about something, that you were self-deceived about something. And then there's this kind of internal evaluation of like, how did I let this happen to myself? It's not just that you let it happen, you're an active participant in the self-deception. So then my mindset then is, how do I not let this happen again? Even pull it away from it. Can I mess up and be wrong again and just self-deceive again? So this is where I become interested in epistemology and like, what is it to know a thing, and how can one know something, and just kind of the levers of it. What's the foundation of knowledge, and how can you say that I know this thing and put your biases aside? That way you don't self-deceive again. So that was my major concern whenever I came out of church. It's like I could easily, if I can easily deceive myself in this way, I could do it again. I could do it again. So it's important to me that I'm not, and that's why I got into philosophy.
So, Robert, I've often wondered, what type of religion or church were you involved in the past?
I was Pentecostal, UPC specifically, and I do believe they're now called UPCI. But it's United Pentecostal organization, and I played around with some other apostolic kind of churches. They're a Unitarian group. I don't know the percentage total, but
they don't believe in the Trinity, right?
They don't believe in the Trinity, and they're not alone. I don't know if the UU Church does the Trinity, but there's a handful of them at an organizational level that they reject the Trinity. They just don't. They kind of take to the Arian position that Arian was right in the argument, and some of the same arguments that Arian lift. I don't know if you know anything about Arian and the whole
Arian
church.
Arian was a non-Trinitarian in the early church.
Yeah, and he was the large opposition and kind of the leader of the large opposition against backing the Trinitarian horse. like when the Trinity as a theology was coming on board in the Catholic Church. We're talking 322, 323 is when this argument was going on. Arian was a staunch proponent of a singular spirit. Sorry about the background. But yeah, he was a large proponent of a singular spirit. And then Trinitarian won. And then there's a whole bunch of Trinitarian indoctrination that slowly gets pushed into the text, even up to like the Comma Johannian. I don't know if you're familiar. There's a verse in John called that we refer to now as the Johannian comma or the Comma Johannian, which is an interpolation that translates a verse that originally said the water, the spirit, and the blood into something much longer than that. It like inserts the 80% of the verse is not in the original text. They've added all of this in to say what this means is the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, basically. And this is interpolation because they've already accepted the Trinity. Now they're pushing it into the text.
Now, were you really into this for a long time? Like, was it a big part of your life?
It was a big part of my life because I was young, and I don't know if you know much about these half cycle theories of like if you're 50 or 60 years old, 1 year is not a big part of your life, whereas if you're 15 years old, 1 year is a very large part of your life.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
That totally makes sense.
Right. So I was young when I first started coming into the subject, and I came in a Baptist church. I guess I was about 14 when I came into it. And when I fully left it, I was probably about 22 whenever I was fully done with the subject. So, but I started as Baptist, then I was kind of converted over to Pentecostal, but I had already fancied myself called into the ministry in the Baptist church. And then by 16, I was over in the Pentecostal church.
So if you felt you were called to ministry, that was serious.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Not everyone
regularly in my Bible. Yeah.
And did you speak in tongues being Pentecostal?
Yes, that is correct. And it's funny now because people are so connected to these things at an emotional level that I know now that I can still do it because I am freed from the idea that this is something that God is moving inside of me or whatnot. But it's a subject that is so sacred to so many people that I don't do it because I understand that to them it's just deeply offensive. That they feel like it's the devil that's moving in you because only God can do this. And really it's just, rattling off some nonsense. And while they truly believe it, it's got to be connected, Lou, with an ecstatic experience that is very hyper and very adrenaline filled. And in that adrenaline filled and ecstatic experience, then you begin to mumbo jumbo and it feels genuine. It completely feels genuine, but this is a method of self-deception kind of at its peak.
So your experience with people that were involved in all that and speaking in tongues, it's that they really did believe this was from God.
Oh, absolutely. They really, truly believe it. And that's why, and I know they believe it and I believed it myself. That's why I say it is just the height of insult to them for people to do it now, almost in a jovial way.
Yeah, I never spoke in tongue. That was not my thing. I guess I was always, and I was a Trinitarian as well. Okay?
Right.
So I was in it different, but I met people that were Unitarian, like you're talking about. On a televangelist, T.D. Jakes, right? I don't know if he was part of the United Pentecostal Church?
I think he was a Trinitarian apostolic. I think he believed the Trinity, but they were they had what they call an apostolic movement, that they believe in the receiving of the Holy Ghost. A lot of them more ardently don't want to call it the Holy Spirit because they're KJV loyalists at heart. and it calls it Holy Ghost. So many of those will call it the Holy Ghost, and they adhere to receiving the Holy Ghost as evidence by speaking with other tongues, and like Acts 2:38 and whatnot. That so T.D. Jakes, I'm pretty sure, is a Trinitarian, Father, Son, Holy Ghost baptized, but still believes in receiving the Holy Ghost.
I thought he was Unitarian.
I may be wrong on that. I have to look T.D. Jakes up, but I really thought he was Trinity.
A lot of other Christians really had a hard time with that with him. You know, they'd say, I used to hear Christians saying, God is using T.D. Jakes, but you know, he doesn't have the right doctrine, you know.
So just on the AI review on this says that T.D. Jakes has publicly stated that he embraces the Orthodox doctrine of the Trinity.
Oh, wow.
Moving away from the oneness Pentecostal view. Okay, so apparently he did at one point hold the oneness view.
That's
okay, so you're right on that.
From way back.
Yeah, so he did pull away from it. Yeah.
Yeah. And how has your life been since abandoning the faith, walking away? Do you feel you're missing something, or do you feel your life has been better?
No, I mean, in general, I feel it's been better, but I generally value like gaining knowledge and experience more than I really value anything else. So not only do I think my life is better, but here's what the weird part: I wouldn't change it or undo it. If I had it to do over, I think I gained something through going through the gauntlet, if that makes sense, that I wouldn't have had if I didn't go through it. So I wouldn't change that.
So you're married, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Do you have any religion in your marriage, or is it totally secular?
Yeah, no. My wife is still a believer. We it's not something that we get into a ton, and I try not to discuss the subject a ton. I think that views have loosened just because there's not a single dichotomy that's introduced to her or heard all the time. So like the very fundamentalist views might have loosened a little bit, and I'm very aware that she's listened to me while I'm talking over here. But yeah, it still seems to be copacetic, and I think at first we had a lot of problems because there was a difference in view on the subject, but now I think we've about figured out, you know, where we're at on the subject, and we're content with that.
I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I really I think that's a wonderful thing. I don't think it should ever impact a personal relationship with another person.
Yeah.
I think that if it does, it's really not a good thing. You know,
Yeah.
I have a girlfriend that I live with for the last 8 years, and she believes in God and Christianity as well.
Yeah.
And she certainly hears what I'm saying as well. So, but it's still okay. I think that it's fine unless you're like completely fanatical in your belief, you know, because if you're completely fanatical and, you know, literal, you know, you think that you can't have a relationship with someone who is not a believer.
Yeah, and that happened a little bit. That's just in that group as a total. So we wound up seeing that kind of manifest in some of the relatives that even encouraged her at some points to leave me because I wasn't a believer, you know. So that hurts. But that's a thing, and it's fairly common. And it's weird how people, and I remember hearing an old individual that was kind of learning the ministry with me at the same time. He was a Black apostolic preacher that was kind of come up through school with me and all. And he used to use this term all the time, using the word in occasion to your flesh, that you use the word to support an ideal that you like, but it's out of context. And I'm reminded of people and how they use verses like to be not unequally yoked as an excuse to say that it's okay to leave your husband, where biblically this is not a valid reason. So they try to find verses in that say, oh no, it's okay, you're supposed to leave your husband in this context, and they'll use something like to be not unequally yoked, which is a greatly just completely out of context verse to try to support this. But it's whatever the people want, then they just find a verse that backs them and justifies them in an action that they might otherwise think is wrong.
Yeah, I think people seek out validation for the beliefs that they've incorporated into their lives, and it's that's a big factor why it's so difficult to leave, because you're looking for reasons to believe. I know I did. I used to read the apologetic books, and if I had questions, I would go to these books and say, all right, well, I can justify philosophically, I can justify what I'm believing, and it keeps you in for a while. At least it did for me. I was a Christian much longer than you, because if you left when you were 22, I was in for probably 30 years.
I say left when I was 22. I left the church already before that. I wasn't attending probably a year and a half before that, but it was something that I was still struggling with whether I was going to hold on to this as a truth statement, that this thing was still there. And there was this kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with any literature on this, on the brass heavens thing, that you pray and you pray now that your mindset has shifted and you're more like, is this me in my own head? So once you have this mindset of doubt, then there's this brass heavens effect, that now that I'm being more skeptical of this is just me in my mind, now I can't hear or feel anything, if that makes sense. So I had this whole dispensation of time that I didn't feel like I could feel God. And in addition to that, there was constantly biblical studies. And from a skeptical viewpoint of seeing, are there scriptures that contradict? Are there problems with this text and that text? And there was less a will to unify and a will to say, no, these things are non-contradictory, but more so a will to look at them plainly and say, are these contradictory statements? Would we make this rule or exception to normal, disconnections where one statement is this and the other one appears to be contradictory? What happens yourself in Christianity, when you want things to not be a contradiction, you start making up all these, there's a way that they can not be contradiction, and you create all these kind of concepts and apparatuses that say they can coexist and not be contradictory. But when you don't have the will to do that and to rectify the two, then you start to see all kind of contradictory problems. And that was the period of time that I was in.
I found it peculiar looking back that the God disappears and leaves your life completely once you stop believing in him. He doesn't. He only has an impact when you believe in him, because I've come to understand it's all in your mind anyway. So when you stop believing in him, truly stop believing in him, there is no more God in your life. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that's a little bit of why I'm skeptic of kind of the standard atheist approach of debate, that there's a way that you can logicalize somebody out of something that they didn't come to believe for logical reasons to start with. I think the altar call, I think the emotional appeal, when people generally come to a religion, whatever that is, it is under the premise of that you can't fix your own life, that you're broken, that you have these problems, and that the only person that can fix them is insert whoever the religious icon is. And that you are a broken mess without that artificer can fix, can mend, can make you feel better, and so forth. And that's the premise in which we accept a thing. We accept it in a broken state, whatever religion you're coming into, and Christianity more so than most, because they even do like these Hell's Gates and Heaven's Flames kind of carrot and stick dichotomy, that you're afraid of this punishment and you want this reward. and you're just in a place of uncertainty. So this is why you come to believe it, because of necessity and pain and hurt, and you accept it for these reasons. And then what happens is apologetics defends it on logical basis and not on the emotional basis of to which they originally came to the belief. So I think if we can't talk to any theist about the emotional reasons that they come to accept the thing, the chances of us, shaking somebody out of something for the logical reasons when there's still all these emotional stitches into the subject, I don't have high hopes for that.
I think I did see that play a few times, the Hell's Gates. What is it called?
I think it's called Hell's Gates and Heaven's no, Hell's Flames and Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames. That's
yes, it. I remember watching that play a few times, and I dabbled in Pentecostalism, although I never spoke in tongues. But I dabbled, but it was the Trinitarian form,
I got you.
It was like the Assembly of God type.
The Assembly of God is the largest one that I know of that's Trinitarian and takes the kind of speaking in tongues thing. Yep.
Yeah, and they would have plays like that, And,
really, I did not know that those plays extended to the Assembly of God. I thought they were primarily Baptist.
I remember seeing them. And they were, big church productions at the time. It was a pretty big deal, and they'd try to invite everyone. You were told to try to invite your friends and anyone else. This way they can get frightened.
Yeah.
That was all about fear, really.
It was all about fear, but then there was this kind of disarray thing, like a creation of chaos inside of this teenager kind of, this is falling apart in my life. This is, that I'm broken in some sense and I can't fix things in my life, and that everything gets better when you give it all to Jesus. So all of that was kind of incorporated into the play, that everything is made better, and that the happy ever after is directly associated with accepting Jesus, So then they create this cognitive structure of happy ever after now that I have done this.
Yeah, and I think the whole born again experience, which I had my experience, but I think that it's all based on a psychological break. It's that I'm broken thing that plays a major role in this type of conversion, because you're right, it's not all intellectual. It's the intellectualism is more from the apologetics, which is trying to have you maintain this belief and hold on to it. But a lot of the conversion is really a psychological break. It's a breakdown. It's almost like, a mental breakdown where you feel you are so needy and you're so depraved that you do need the Savior, and it's like you give up. At least I did. You give up your life and you exchange it for the life of Christ.
Yeah.
Which is, now thinking back on it, I'm like, wow, I was really far out,
Yeah, it's a will to indenturement is what it is. I seen B.S. Lewis is on here, and how's it going? I seen he made a comment on here. The stats show 6 deconversions for every convert. I'm curious where such stats come from. I do know that people can deconvert from logical conversation, but I think it's generally that they're already in a comfortable emotional state and that they don't have the emotional stitches that are already kind of in there. So if they're in that's a pew, I would love to I'll have to look into that one. Because I think right now, like the growth rate is still, I think atheists should be distinct from what we call the nuns in these in these surveys. And I think we did have a transition point from 2013 to 2023, where there was a growth in the United States from 2% to 4% that identified as atheists. So that is a doubling over the course of 2 years inside of the atheist group, but that is still such a small portion of American society, even at 4%. And then when we look at numbers like 13% that are identifying as nones or just no religions, they're not outright saying that they don't subscribe to a religion. So I'm not sure if that Pew Research thing is incorporating nones as deconversion, that they don't have a religion anymore. If that is the case, then that number it might be more valid. But if we're talking about people that are now identifying as atheists, when we're only looking at a 4% over the nation, then in that case, I have serious doubts that we're talking about a 6-to-1 deconversion, just because the numbers in the atheist side is just too low to support that kind of number. But I'll be happy to be wrong on this subject. I will be ecstatic to be wrong on it. But I try to be skeptic of my skepticism also.
I speak to people that just don't care about these things. And I guess that would be a form of agnosticism. Like they just literally, it doesn't play a role in their lives. They don't really take a big stand on either side, atheist or believer. But the religion just plays no role in their life, you know. And I think that's a form of agnosticism, you know.
No, well, agnosticism it's just addressing two different things. Like atheist is just addressing whether you have the active belief. And this was Christopher Hitchens did this argument constantly. Is belief active? Do you have to have an active belief to be a theist? And is it active or inactive? And if we say that we do not hold a belief in the affirmative, then definitionally that's an atheist. Whereas an agnostic is just speaking about the subject of knowledge and whether it can be known. And so when you, in a general sense, when you say I am agnostic, it's generally meant to refer to a God that you don't know, if you don't think that can be known. That's not a subject that epistemologically it can check the box to say that it meets the JTB model or it is a thing that can be known. So that's a different subject of whether you hold it in the affirmative. But some people now use the term agnostic in relation to a claim, not just theism. So they might say, I'm agnostic concerning that, you know, whether we can know if our brain's in a vat, for example. So you might say, in terms of the brain in a vat question, I'm agnostic to. That's not, in that context, agnostic is just saying that that's a subject that's beyond our knowledge. We can't know it. So I think we're using agnosticism more fluidly, but I think when you generally just identify as agnostic, it's referring to God. How's it going there, Scott?
Hey, how's it going, Robert?
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Lou.
When you're talking about not knowing, I know my own son is a person like that. Like he doesn't know if there's a God or not. He doesn't really care because he feels it's unknowable. So I think that's agnostic. You know, he doesn't feel it's knowable. He thinks that people who say they know don't know. so it's kind of plays it doesn't play any role in his life. You know?
I want to be clear. I don't think you can know in the general sense of the claim of a God. In the specific sense where you get character that can be defined of the God, and that character can be seen as like mutually exclusive incompatibilities, that you can't be both this and that, then we can say in definitional terms that God cannot be, just because it's contradictory in its nature. So in that sense, we can say certain things that we know they're not. But in the broader sense, can we say that we can know that there isn't a God? I don't think we've ever been able to do that, just and be honest epistemologically. But that's not, to me, that's not the burden. To say the burden is always to believe a thing in the affirmative. We need to have grounding to believe the thing in the affirmative. Otherwise, there's no reason to believe it in the affirmative. So to me, it's completely consistent with, first, you're agnostic. You recognize that we can't know it in an epistemological sense. And then secondly, to me, the very next natural position is, therefore, we should not believe it. So if you can't know it to be true, why hold it to be true?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I see that too. I mean, that's a lot of the journey out of Christianity, I think. It's realizing that you really can't be sure, even though you were trying to be sure and you were trying to reinforce your belief. And there comes a point where you're going down that road and you realize, gee, I really don't know, you know. And then you're one step away, I guess, to atheism. You're getting close. One thing I want to ask you, Robert, and I'm going to ask Scott the same thing because I'm curious. Like, when you did leave religion and you left, did you have to fill it with something, or did you fill it with something else, like those pursuits?
Yeah. So, in a way, in a way I did. I'll say this. There to me is something of a litmus question, that everyone should ask themselves. And I think it's the biggest part of like deconversion. And it's the idea that the truth is representative of a thing that is objective in reality, and that God is whatever we idealize God to be, right? So when you ask a question like, if God and truth are in contradiction, which one do you pick, God or truth? I think the fervent Christian will answer the question as they're non-separatable. That God and truth are not, they can't be separated because they're the exact same thing. But this is just a problem that they can't recognize their view of God is only that it can be wrong, right? So if you accept that you can only have your, and I'll use Kant's term, your phenomenal definition or experience, your ideal of what God is, and then there is the thing which is true of reality. So when you can accept that, you have to have the question, if truth and God or my ideal of God are in conflict with one another, do I pick truth or my ideal of God? And I think the litmus test is, if someone says God, you can have all the conversation with them in the world and they will not deconvert. They will not deconvert. But if that person says truth and that they would pick truth even over God, that person can deconvert because their value set is in knowing what the truth is, even if it isn't their ideal of what the God is. So for me, the truth statement, what made my division and what made my litmus thing is, I want to know what is truth. And if that brings me back to God, if God is true, it doesn't matter what's true of reality. And the more I understand it of it, it will simply lead me back to God because God is true. So then my pursuit become almost a religious ideal of truth, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it becomes studying that in a secular sense.
That's my journey.
But that's what I filled my world with, is trying to understand more of what makes things true.
Yeah, I want to know what is true. And I don't think I'm ever going to know everything that's true because it's just too much to know. But I want to know as much truth as I can. That definitely led me out of Christianity. Hey, Scott.
Hey.
I want you to tell us, if you would, when you left religion, was it a net positive? And did you have to replace your religious beliefs with something else? And did you replace it with something that has helped you to negotiate life better than the religion did?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it too. I like that. Negotiate life. That's awesome. I have to use that. Um,
Well, isn't it what we're all trying to do, really? We're all trying to negotiate life.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, when I left, because I left a fundamentalist kind of religion. So for me, it was all about truth. Like when you're part of these fundamentalist type versions of Christianity or whatever, all it takes is one straw to break the camel's back. It's like all of it's true. That's what you're taught, that every piece of it's true, and if one part of it's not true, then it's up to question, and that's not the nature of God. That's the way they kind of sell you on the idea to begin with. So if you go through it and you have a doubt, it's very detrimental to your faith. And then, at the same time, you've been conditioned to look at more liberal um, interpretations of the religion as definitely false. So you're already kind of primed up to leave religion completely. And it seems like, in my experience, most people that are atheists are folks that came from some fundamentalist type of religious view. Not everybody, but I'm in my experience, it's been that way because they found out one thing that caused them a problem. Maybe it was slavery in the Bible. That was one for me. Maybe it was um the earth isn't really 6,000 years old. It's actually a lot of evidence that it's much older. And if someone gets hung up on that, they're just gonna be out the door. It's not negotiable. And so it's kind of put to them that way. I know it was for me. It's like, look, man, if you don't, if you're gonna have a problem with slavery in the Bible, then see you later, man. Because who are you to question God? Who are you to put God on your judgment seat? So that's the way it was kind of put to me. And who are you to say that science has disproved God? You're going to trust science over the word, And so you're kind of put in that position to begin with. And I think statistically, most people that leave religion find some kind of other sort of meaning makers.
That's
You
what
know,
I'm exploring.
yeah,
It's like when you leave something that is important to you, there's something that happens, and you're I think you kind of need psychologically to replace that you used to believe, or that you've come to understand as not being true, with something else that grounds your psyche.
yeah.
You
I think
know
for
what I'm saying?
a lot of people go to politics. They get involved in a lot of political stuff, then they just focus their life on that, or they get really involved in their work. It's like they find meaning in their work. They find meaning in, you know, being part of the process of politics and stuff like that. And usually, if you're coming from like a really um, evangelical fundamental, they'll usually swing to the left. They'll probably reject it. They'll reject everything about their religion, and then anything about the religion that reminds them, like, say, uh, conservatism or Republicans, because they're always flaunting the Bible. They hide behind basically three things: the flag, the Bible, and children. And so these sort of things cause people that are leaving fundamentalist religions to say, you know what, I'm gonna be a leftist. For whatever reason, they'll just say, you know what, this Bible stuff is bullshit. I'm now for abortion. I'm now for um, you know, separation of church and state. I'm for all the things that will just thumb in the eye to the evangelical crowd, and they'll just go that way. I know I
The
had that.
will to rebel.
Yeah, the will to
Like
rebel.
Camus writes about this, that it's just they just take the oppositional position now.
Yeah, and for me, because I'm sort of just the way that my brain is wired up. I'm somebody who's like so skeptical that I'm skeptical of my own skepticalness. And so I see myself doing certain things and I'm thinking to myself, well, wait a minute, am I being this way as a reaction, or am I really sold on this shit? Like, what do I really want? Who am I really? And what do I really know? And what is truth? By the way, what is this thing we call truth? Is it even accessible? And what things can I know and what things can't I know? And it led me personally down a journey of introspection, philosophy, different spiritual modalities, mainly like Eastern wisdom traditions, things of that nature, so that I could get at what do I know for a fact, and then from that, what can I infer that's more parsimonious, that's more intellectually genuine, coherent, and I just became like very philosophically minded. Now, a lot of people aren't like that. A lot of people just don't give a fuck. They're like, you know what? Who cares? You know, um, all I know is the Republicans are ruining this country, and somebody's got to stand and do some shit about that. And that's what gives them meaning. And I'm like, okay, but I'm just a little different. So everybody's probably a little different.
I drifted politically when I knew I was an atheist and I no longer believed in God. I was still on the conservative Republican side generally,
Hmm.
but over time I kept drifting towards the left. So that's my
Yeah,
own personal, my politics went to the left, but it
yeah,
wasn't immediate. It was little by
right,
little.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
you get tired of hearing all that Bible thumping stuff, man, and you're like, you know what, screw these guys. You're like you become singularly focused. It's like one issue is enough to kind of make you move away from the right. It's like that one's enough.
Yeah. And it's weird because I kind of went through a lot of the same thing. And I left the subject of religion once I kind of tried to self evaluate the question of like, do people need this? And I know this is a question that I've gotten mixed results. I've talked to Neil on Skeptic Haven about this and what's his name, David. But the position that some people might need this to fill their void because they don't know how to fill the void otherwise, and that the transition is such a difficult transition, not only the framework in your ontology of like what reality is, but also in terms of like your personal connections and what purpose is, and just all of these questions, so that people have to be in a right place that they're ready to step out from that and have kind of the strength to carry things on their own shoulders. And if they don't have that, it may be that they always need this kind of crutch, that they always need to lean on it. And I know a lot of people will condemn that and say no, that they think that everybody should be able to grow out of this. And in a perfect world, absolutely logic should prevail, but there's value systems that you can't overcome alts, like alt positions, that someone holds more value in this thing than they do, let's say, in being right or being logical. Then how do you convince someone that they should value logic with logic if they don't value logic, if that makes sense? Like,
Hmm.
how can you use logic to convince someone that they should value logic if they just don't? And those are serious and unsurmountable barriers that you can't get over. So it may very well be the case that people just at an experiential level have to shift and change in their life before they could be more willing to change and just hold more value in logical things. So I think that it is the case that some people are just presently at a state that they can't change.
Yeah, and you make a good point about values because really I never like when it comes to politics and stuff like that, I always look at that as not a matter of facts and truth. And I think it's about values. What do you value, and why? And it doesn't even ask the questions why or anything like that. It's just they've set up these parties and these organizations that appeal to the values of people. And they even sell you values. They even convince you of what your values should be. And really that's the name of the game, is value. And it's sort of hard to deal with religious minded people. Really most everyone is just value driven. It's like a lot of this stuff, even atheists, I would say, in my experience, from what it seems like, I know I can't speak for everyone, but a lot of people are atheists because they feel a moral duty more than anything else. And this is how they fill that void. They may say, I want to build a world where people are logical, where people are evidence driven, where people are against, cruelty, and we're more about humanitarianism and well being, and all that stuff is great. And so those are the values that they fight for with religious fervor. And you can see that shit right online on your Facebook feeds and stuff. People arguing, and you wonder, because a lot of religious people are like, why do you care so much about what I believe? Like,
Because
yeah,
they
I
heard
believe,
that John Lennon song, Imagine, and it just
yeah,
stuck in their craw.
yeah, it bothers them that, because they've come out of religion, they've opened their eyes to a new paradigm. And for them, it's almost like an awakening, like an enlightening. I know I felt that way. I felt like, wow, the veils were dropped and I'm seeing the world in a totally expanded way. And I feel free, more freedom. I feel more liberated. And I want to share that. And in fact, I want to make it my mission to convince religious people that they're wrong, because I want the world to be experience what I experienced. But what I didn't understand is that a lot of people are just not going to have those kind of values. A lot of people they just are not going to get with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of the gauntlet that I ran through, and what I meant to get back to earlier is, so at some point under the auspice that some people are just, they are not going to change, and maybe they're just not in a place. I abandoned the subject because you can be ungilding the lily, so to speak, that they don't want that they don't want that, and that it would just catastrophically destroy them. So I left the subject alone and just let people believe whatever it is they want to believe. And a good 17 years or so went by, and then I seen these little nicks constantly at the approachment of religion onto people's individual autonomy, and pushing prayer in school, and then just a more conservative Supreme Court and all of these kind of things. And then finally found out that my daughter, at her school, that the teacher was taking them by the hands and leading them all in prayer, and these kind of things. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I said, well, I can't be out of this anymore. I can't just sit back and let people to their own devices anymore. There is a fight that is to be fought, because they have a mission to proselytize, and our individual rights and our individual freedoms, and the freedom for us to keep our kids away from this. They don't care about that. They don't care about that. And they have a divine right to supersede that in their mind. So they march like soldiers in this subject, and it's completely moral for them to teach our children Christianity in the school systems. That's the higher moral ground in their mind, and you can't convince them otherwise. So they're challenging our autonomy, and we just have to stand up and say something.
Yeah. The morality thing for me is kind of a big thing. Morality, Christian morality, is something that is dictated. It's God says something in the Bible, right? It's all Bible based. And that becomes a moral standard for the Christian. I know it was for me, all right? But I have come to feel that morality is best when it's based on reason and it's based on human flourishing. And I do want to get that message out there. So in a way, I feel I'm a little bit of an evangelist for atheism in that way, because
And
I think it's important to have morality based on reason and human flourishing, not on a authoritarian dictator in the sky. That just that's like, to me, that will destroy a country. I think if we go all in on that,
yeah, I'm a big proponent of just freedom of speech and expression and things of that nature. So I feel like most people are going to do what makes them feel good anyways, regardless of what the facts are, what you present. But what you can do is you can always plant seeds for whatever your values are. And people that can resonate with it get a chance to see that. And so you're making your life meaningful when you do that. But expecting the world to convert over, or expecting even one person to convert over to your way of thinking, is a little unrealistic and can drive you nuts. It can be a little neurotic. So, it's better to just kind of just put it out there for people, And, you know, if they can agree, great. You know, if people can see some value or even a little bit, that's awesome. But if not, don't worry about it. Just keep doing what you got to do. Because think about it, the religious people aren't going to stop. They're going to keep on promoting and Bible thumping and all of that. You know, they're going to keep doing it. So it's equal. It's all fair and game. And, you know, it's like how the Democrats and Republicans, they actually need each other. We all need each other to make this diverse planet we live on, and for meaning. You know, we kind of need an opposition, you know, and that gives us that kind of, it's kind of like creates a meaning for ourselves. So I just,
yeah, every light needs a darkness to define itself oppositionally as the light. So, and the problem is that it could be the darkness in some sense, and just define itself as the light oppositionally. So yeah, that's the whole problem with the dichotomy of like Democrats and Republicans, that Republicans are the good guys just because the Democrats are the bad guys and vice versa. So, and I'm not saying that one of these are not correct. Don't get me wrong. I do back that horse that the Conservative Party has went completely off the deep end, especially since the Trump movement. I came out of church and I did still identify more as a conservative, but I was very much middle of the aisle until Trump come along. And when Trump come along, I felt more and more alienated from conservative ideals that I just had to completely disassociate myself with it.
I don't know who he is.
I think that Trump epitomizes what is wrong or can be terribly harmful about religion. And it's the authoritarian aspect. You know, you're given your morality. You know, you're not actually thinking through things for yourself. It's a cult to me. You know, it's a very, very similar to religion. And
Yeah.
By the way,
I want to speak out against that the best I can. You know.
I just wanted to give a quick plug on here on my channel on Skeptic Philosophy Saturday. We're going to talk about objective ethics model and specifically objective ethics that comes on here and is chatted a few times. Hopefully, we're going to get a bigger look at his objective ethics model on my channel at 2 p.m. Saturday. So we're going to have him on. We're going to talk a little bit about his model. Hopefully, he'll open up about it. I know he's wanting to keep a few cards close because he wants to have a debate that is already scheduled, I think, for later this month. But hopefully we'll be able to talk about his model a little bit and see kind of what his ideals are, and a little back and forward about what can be grounding in objective morality.
Yeah, we are supposed to debate after that sometime in January, he told me. So we're going to have a debate about objective ethics. And you know, and I'll just let everybody know I really am sort of agnostic about ultimately agnostic about whether morality is truly objective. I mean, I understand both points, and it really just depends on how you frame the argument. So, you know, the way I look at it is the way I've heard objective ethics frame his argument, I see weaknesses. And so, yeah, we'll do a debate, and I'll try to do my best to dismantle his argument for what it is. But as far as my true belief on it, I think it's a little bit of both. You know, it's a little bit of, there's some objective aspects to morality.
Are you familiar with constructivism? I believe is the model that they now call it. I think Kant had a lot of input. What is modernly called constructivism, and it's something of a. I think it's still mind independent, but it might be more laden with ideas of like DNA and how the DNA builds the thing that is the apparatus for consciousness. So it is mind independent in the sense that it's a part of the building blocks of the DNA. But anyway, but there's constructivism models that are kind of all over the place that are a little mix of both.
Well, you know, there's a biologist. He was on the Lex Friedman show earlier this week. You guys, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I'd probably say take a look at it. But he's had some breakthrough research, you know, not just philosophical armchair type stuff, but a lot of real actionable sort of research that has tested, verified, evidential sort of stuff to sort of talk about consciousness, values, meaning from a very simple level of reality, like to a very cellular level, single cell level, um, about that really can inform you about how maybe consciousness um, comes about, and then of course everything that entailed in it, like morality, like ethics, like all that kind of stuff. And it's very interesting. I mean, if I wouldn't dare try to explain it right here, but I would just invite everybody. I think it was a really good interview on the Lex Friedman show, so you can take a look at it if you're interested in that kind of stuff, and it can kind of help you understand maybe where objective ethics may be coming from. But I don't think as far as I know, I don't know if he's really familiar with that kind of stuff. I think he mainly grounds ethics in just the classical story of evolution as we've all grown up to understand it. That's just a blind process.
Yeah, I want to get more of the roots of kind of the definitions of the terms, because and I am kind of the mindset, and I've heard this said before, that that it may be the case that if everyone had the exact same definitions on words, and that they all agreed on definitions, that there may very well not be any disagreement in the world. But the fact is, like, everybody has a disagreement on what the definitions of a thing is. So there's all these kind of different frameworks because of the definition. So like, he may have a thing, and I think he's done a video very recently, a short video about what free will is. And I think that he believes that we have free will in some sense, and that if there is no free will, then there cannot be subjective ethics. And I know these are two different kind of categorical things, but he ties these two together, I think. So I kind of want to get more kind of definitional standards of and look at his sets and see like what he assigns as inside of a set and where he defines the parameters of sets, and just talk more about definitions before we get into the subject more, because I think a lot of it is just like where people differ in definitions, and I just kind of want to figure out where he's at on it first.
Yeah, and you look at internal consistency. So a lot of people will argue and say, well, subjective morality is contradictory as a concept, because you got to think about it. If they'll make the argument, like, say, like a slave master relationship with a slave, you'll say, well, slavery is just a subjective thing. It's good. It depends on the time when it was practiced. Maybe society saw it as the normal thing to do or whatever. But the contradiction may come in, a lot of people will argue, where they'll say, well, obviously they know it's immoral or it's wrong, because the master would never want to trade places with the slave. It's almost like there's already a built-in value into it, that there, and so it's not really consistent to say that there's a subjective component to slavery, because you have that slave master relationship, and it's already built in. Just not, maybe it's just not it's so subtle most people don't realize it, that they'll say,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I didn't mean to take over or make this a predominant thing of the. It's just something that we're going to talk about on Saturday, and we're going to get into. And I just wanted to mention it. And now I know we all kind of we get a little passionate about the subject of morals and like, where do morals come from? I think that everybody's there in the subject, whether you're atheist or you're agnostic. If you don't have the kind of the locked deontological model that is, it's wrong because God says it, then you have a lot of very firm views on how all this is operating and how we feel at an intuitive sense that this is wrong and this is right. And I even seen, what is it, Billy Bob in here, that it's just common sense, but that you don't fuck your neighbor, is what he's mentioning in here. But that is at an intuitive level, that just the thing is, I don't think morality though is inside of the set of logic. I don't think that it exists inside of logic. It's a different thing. We try to say, well, how do you get to morality inside of logic? But you can't get value sets at all inside of logic. You can't get values. So values have to be defined at an emotional level. So or there is maybe there's an argument for there is intrinsic value, if you want to, and maybe that's the argument that's going to be had.
Yeah.
I just don't think you can get to these things logically. They're more so outside of that set, and they're more in the things which you value.
I got Jeff wanting to come on, and I'm looking forward to Jeff. Let me bring him in. He might have questions for any of us. I don't know. Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
Hey, fellas, what's going on? I'm doing good. How about you?
Good. All right, welcome.
I did have some questions for you guys. I haven't watched it before, so I'm not sure.
And we might have different answers, which is okay. Too.
Right. Now, are all three of you atheists?
I am.
Yeah, I'm fine with that title.
Yeah, I'm good with atheism.
Okay. Yeah. My first question, I guess, would be,
hey, before we go any further, can we find your position?
That's kind of what I was getting ready to get into.
And define atheism too. How do you define atheism? Because it may
that's one of the questions I want to ask. Is atheism, you just absolutely do not believe that there is a God or a creator of any kind?
So you guys go one at a time. Scott, Robert, and then I'll answer the question.
Okay. I guess the problem for me is I don't know what a God really is. That's kind of where I'm stuck. I don't know, because everyone's got different definitions of God.
Right.
So to say I believe in God, well, I don't. Which one? What do you mean?
Isn't that more agnostic though? I guess that's really where my confusion lies.
Yeah, because
agnosticism, I 100% understand. That's, if you were going to put me in a category, that would be the category. That's my phone, by the way, screaming. I don't have somebody locked in the closet or anything.
Yeah,
but
so there's one way to look at it.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, one way to look at it is maybe I look at agnosticism about knowledge and atheism about belief. So the not knowing informs my not believing. Like to say, like, do I believe that there's a teacup floating around Jupiter? I don't know, therefore I don't believe it. I'm not saying it's not possible.
Well, isn't that that's what I'm saying? Isn't that agnosticism basically?
It's rooted, yeah.
Saying that you can't say because you don't know.
It's not part of my experience, right?
Right. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I guess that's my biggest question is where the line is drawn between atheism and agnosticism.
Yeah, that's
because fair. I completely understand the fact that we can't know. You know, just to give you a little background, I wasn't raised in a religious family. I've never been a religious person. I've always had kind of my own beliefs that I keep to myself, except the rare case that like Jehovah's Witnesses come to the door and then I'd kind of mess with them a little bit. But other than that, but really in the past year, I do believe in creation, mostly for just scientific reasons. You know, I'm sure you guys have probably discussed that at some point or whatever, you know, where we came from and yada, yada. And I have gotten into exploring religions and I'm studying all of them. I'm halfway through the Quran right now, about halfway through the Tanakh. I'm actually going to read the whole Tanakh, you know, just to find, I think there's wisdom to be found really in all of these ancient religions. I don't think any of them have it exactly right. But I also know that I don't know, you know, so I've always been very agnostic my whole life.
So I wanted to just give some clarification because you use the term the line between, and I don't think there is a line between the two because they're two different magisteriums. There's not a point at which like a quarter is then money. Like it is both a quarter and it is money. These are the subject of agnosticism is about just whether you can know, and if you don't have a belief in the affirmative, then you are that thing, if that makes sense. So I could definitionally be defined as an atheist, if that makes sense, because I don't hold a belief in a fairy. So, and I know there's a little bit of recoil at this, and I've seen it before. But the thing is, the broad majority, and there's Deconverted even done a survey on this to see what atheists see the definition of atheism as being, and the vast majority of people just hold this as they do not hold a belief in the affirmative. So if someone doesn't hold a belief in the affirmative that a God is, then they don't have an active belief, and then definitionally they are an atheist.
So atheism isn't saying I know there's not
there isn't one. That's correct. And this is, I think you'll see this repeatedly in surveys. It is not a claim in the affirmative that there is not. It is just I do not hold in the affirmative that there is.
Right. I guess that was just, I understood that as being agnostic, more or less, but that explains a lot. I don't know if you guys know Alex O'Connor.
Yes.
I watch his stuff
all
a ton.
the time.
Think he's a real sharp guy, but I also watch a ton of Jordan Peterson stuff, and stuff. A lot of the guys that he debates with, I also watch their stuff. But yeah, I guess that was a big part of my confusion, is whether or not an atheist says, I know there's not a God, or if it's more what is agnostic in my mind, where I can't know that there is, I can't know that there's not.
Hey, Jeff, I think that like almost anything, there's just different ways that people refer to these things. And like for me, I'm atheist, and I define myself as an atheist because I do not believe in any supernatural gods. That's it. All right. There's nothing more to it for me.
Right. So you're not saying that that there's not. You're just saying that you don't believe in it.
And then I'm agnostic at the same time as I'm atheist. That's how I see it.
I get it now. You guys have done
because I do not know these things definitively. So that's how if I really get into defining my position, it's agnostic atheism.
Okay. All right. I get it. That was a good explanation.
They're not incompatible.
Right. What you guys were talking about earlier about pushing Christian morals. What like Christian morals do you guys not agree with?
I would say maybe authoritarianism on one hand.
So give me an example of that, because
like,
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like, depending on your version of Christianity, like from where I come from, it was the fact that you cannot be saved. Anyone who's going to be saved from hellfire is going to have to confess Jesus is Lord, and every knee will bend towards that king.
Right.
He's the king, and you have to glorify. In fact, life is like a race. Life is like a race for the crown. So it's another system of sticks and carrots. And that system of sticks and carrots, I'm not really sold on. I'm not convinced at all that it's should be true or could be true, or I just don't see it as true. So, I don't know. I no longer endorse it or give it any serious consideration until someone can show me why I should care about such a thing, right?
Right.
So that's the one thing.
I think their idea, I think most Christians are like, you should care because, if you don't, whatever it is, get saved, or
God will he'll hurt you.
Believe in God, right? Then, something I'm getting into is I've been looking really hard in the Bible to find where it describes hell. And honestly, the only thing I found in the Bible.
I've made a whole video on this subject. I've studied quite well on this subject, and when you're talking about like in Mark, where this first introduction of the ideal of Gehenna gets conflated, and then we have the early church writer that uses the Latin word infernus, which he uses the word infernus for translating both Gehenna, which is a city, and Hades, which is the Greek word for the grave that was used in Hebrew. So what you have is this constant grave that is constantly. This is why the Jews don't believe in hell. They never did. It wasn't in their doctrine pre-Christianity. The ideal of a hell as a place, Sheol. There you go. The place of punishment ideal didn't come about until the ideals in Mark, where Mark first introduces Jesus saying that it will take you to Gehenna, and this can be translated as a bad place. You can just say Gehenna is iconicized as a bad place where fires are burning, where the poor are kicked out of the city, and you have bums that live outside of there and whatnot. So it could very well be just inside of the narrative that Jesus is saying that sin will take you to Gehenna, a bad place, and you can feel that the sin will take you to a bad place. But then Christian ideology took a hold of it and started transferring this into, they're conflating Gehenna with Hades. And it first happened with Jerome, actually first wrote it, if I'm not mistaken, in about 340, where he translated it as both of them as infernus. And now they're both the same thing. So the grave and Gehenna are the same thing, and now it's a place of punishment. But this emergent ideology inside of Christian texts, it did not exist in the Hebrew text.
Yeah, I think Dante's Inferno kind of weaseled its way in there, and that's what everybody's idea of hell became. But yeah, from what I found in the Bible so far, is hell is basically just being separated from God. So, but I mean, we all know that different religions and churches and Christianity, I mean, the reason we have so many denominations, everybody just kind of takes their own way and turns it into what they're going to turn it into. But I do believe that, I mean, honestly, in society, our moral structure has really kind of been based on Christianity. I mean, the 10 Commandments, basically, it's just kind of how our society formed. That's why my question was like, you guys were like pushing these morals on us. I was wondering what morals that just Christianity, not a specific church or the extremes, are pushing that you guys don't like.
Well, it depends on how arbitrary you want to be. Like, we can say that, yeah, society sprung out of the Christian church, or we can say that the Christian church sprung out of Judaism, or we can say that Judaism sprung out of Canaanite religion. You can see the Code of Hammurabi that influenced, the law of Moses. Some of the creation story was borrowed. I mean, it just depends on how far we want to go back. It's kind of like, for me, it's kind of like when you go for these job applications and they say, can you tell me what is your race? Black, white, other, whatever. It's like, well, how far do you want to go back in my lineage? Do you want to go back to Africa? Then I'm black. Or do you want to go, like, just how far are we going back to identity? All of this identity stuff. And religion sort of falls under that umbrella of identity, where we just we arbitrarily select what we want to believe is the root of our morals and our values and things like that. But if we were really to be accurate about it, then we would have to really study the entire religious history.
Right. But I mean, I think that's kind of arbitrary. I think really minimalizes it. Just to give you guys an example, I actually did a video and about how Jesus was the goat, even without any sort of divinity or supernatural, connections. He, like the Sermon on the Mount, he kind of laid it down. In my view, in religion, if there is a God, and I think there is, I just don't really, I'm trying to figure out what that is or what it means, which I think everybody does. But to me, if there was a God and everything was as screwed up as it was, to me, Jesus was God sending down his only begotten son. Basically, here's the dude, here's how you do it, end of story. To me, what Jesus taught is morals. It gave us our moral structure. What he was preaching at the time flew directly in the face of Roman culture, love your enemy, all that stuff. to me, that's the morals that Christianity is based on. And of course, we as human beings took that and screwed it all up. It got corrupted by the Catholic Church. And I mean, obviously, even the Catholics saw it get screwed up. That's why there was the schism. And a lot of this stuff I'm still learning. I'm definitely, if I'm incorrect on anything.
Jeff,
Go ahead.
let me just say, to answer your question, right, for myself, and I only speak for myself, and that's what's important in my take on morality.
Mhm.
See, the authoritarian aspect of Christian morality, to me, in and of itself, is immoral. Okay, one, I guess I can give two quick examples of that. All right, one would be the view that you should never have sex outside of marriage.
I don't agree with that one myself.
All right, so that's to me not something that should be put on people. All right, slavery, of course, but I know the Christians, dance around that. All right, I think morality should be based upon humans and human reason, and that's it. The authoritarian aspect of it, telling people what they must believe
Right.
regarding morality in and of itself, to me, is immoral. So, I mean, I hope you can even understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand
like,
what you're saying.
you know,
I would
like
say
to
with that
me,
though, that's
It
not
would be negative to have a Christian run society is a negative to me. It's a net negative. It's not positive.
I would say that's not just Christianity. That's not just religion. That's any government. I mean, you can look at it like a Christian run society. Well, our government still tells us, still puts limits, puts laws on us, just like Christianity does. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
but
I think
there's laws.
that's more of a form of control.
Yeah, but laws, all right, are not entering your psyche. Okay. All right. In other
Right.
words, you have
There is that
laws,
aspect to it. There is
there's
that aspect
laws
to it for sure.
that society has.
Right.
And they
Well,
could
I
be
mean, I guess
based
the
on
biggest difference
intent.
there is
But Christianity wants to attack what you think. And that's a horrible thing.
right.
Just
Right.
horrible.
Well, our society does
Conviction for
that in
thought
general.
crimes also, but
Right. That's our society in general. I guess religion just takes it that next step above where law can't. Law can put you in jail or take your life. Religion, they take your eternity. So that's the threat there.
Your mind. That's how
Right.
I,
Right.
I mean, I
So,
don't
let
want
me,
my mind being
interject.
captured.
let me
My
interject
mind
with my
wants to be
problems
free,
then.
man.
Right.
Because I have a slew of problems, and I'll just start with three of them. First of all, I don't think that Christianity or even Abrahamic law, Abrahamic ideas added anything to the moral argument to start with. I think if you look at like Egyptian laws that supposedly they came out of, then they come up with the Ten Commandments. Every one of the Ten Commandments that are about moral subjects were already inside of the 42 Mayat or MAAT laws. They were already inside of that. Plus, we had many more that would suggest things like not raping or not things that we don't have as a moral imperative inside of Christianity, that we don't have that defined as saying that this thing is not right. So now we already have more moral models in another religion, that we have a better rule set. And if you think about the Ten Commandments, first of all, I think the first four don't even speak to like social interactions and what's morally right or wrong between people. It's the first, right out the gate, it's to love the Lord your God, a commandment to love somebody in a servile way, that you're commanded to love someone, which has nothing to do with moral interactions to start with. It offers us nothing. And then it's like to keep the Sabbath day holy. These are things that are not addressing morality to start with. So at best, we have 6 or 7 things that are even addressing morality inside of the context of the Ten Commandments. And then when we talk about the character that is Jesus, we get just as many of these turn the other cheek verses as we do take up the sword that if I say to you that if you don't hate your mother and father, then the love of Christ is not in you. And we get verses like this. So
Right.
as quick as we can say things like, yeah, Jesus is giving this radical ministry of turning the other cheek and this forgiveness thing inside of the Roman context, there was not a lot of that going on, but we had a little bit of it already in, and I keep mentioning this because he's the most similar character that predates Jesus, and that's Dionysius. And I've mentioned it on this channel before. Everyone that wants to know about Dionysius, you should look into him because he was a very similar character. So when I hear people talk about Jesus was just completely radically different than anyone of the time, I just completely disagree. He just wasn't. There were some people that already had these ideas that were going on. And secondly, I think but the biggest reason of all of it is intuitively we can come up with better moral structures than anything that entire book said. I can call a 6-year-old in here and get them to write down a rule set of things that are right and wrong. And that 6-year-old can create a better rule set than we get from the totality of the Bible. We will get right out the bat that we shouldn't treat people based on their race or their color or something like this. So we get these kind of things that are not, that we don't even get that in the Bible. We can't get not rape someone. We can't even get that in the context that you shouldn't own someone. So the depravity that we get, that to act as if this is great moral authority, then it stops people from saying, okay, let's think up better rules. And then you have this deontological, it's wrong because God says it rather than the outcome that it will lead to. So I have a problem with picking a deontological rule set rather than a consequential rule set to start with, because then you can't even define like drinking and driving as wrong. Like, I dare you show me in the Bible how drinking and driving is incorrect.
They didn't have cars.
Right. They didn't have cars, but you can't even get to the rule set because the rule set of getting to not drinking and driving is concerned with consequences, not a rule, but the consequences of an outcome. So
Right.
You have to find a rule. You have to create your own rule because you're concerned with an outcome. So this is a totally different way than deontological, because deontological says it's wrong because it is rule A or rule B, and God gave the rules. But if you're concerned with the consequences, then you can build your own rules to avoid those consequences. So this is the problem, not just with Christianity, but anything that claims deontological ethics that are just intrinsically, they're wrong because X stated they are wrong. They have to be able to adjust and adapt when we have things like cars and other things that we can state that they're wrong because consequences are coming into play.
Right. Well, see, I see that's the way that I see religion is basically a structure to relay consequences to doing wrong things. I mean, that's why you have a God and the wrath of God. And even in Islam, you know, Allah will send you to hell if you don't do more good than bad. I mean, to me, that's in every religion, other than unless you get into like Far Eastern religions, is that sort of the structure. Here are the rules, break the rules. Here's the consequences. It just doesn't go into the philosophy of why those rules are rules.
Jeff, can we do better?
Can we do better
than ancient texts that tell us things like, you know, stone somebody to death if they commit adultery? Can we do better than that?
Well, sure, and we have evolved. I don't think anybody's been stoned to death for adultery in a while,
so
at least not in our country.
Why not just throw the ancient book away and make rules?
Why not fix what's broken and not fix what's not broken?
One thing
rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, I could imagine
because that belief system is something that puts people mentally in a box, and they're told things like, you know, if you are homosexual, that you are committing an abomination against the God, and this is not in any way, shape, or form something we should be looking at as
to me that's not God. I see the Bible this way. I think that there is divine inspiration in it. I think there's wisdom in there that didn't come from the men of the time, but I think it was written down by men. And I think if I'm writing something down, I don't know if I can help myself from putting my own perspective bias into it, putting my own rules into it. You know, I mean, I don't think that you can take Christianity and just toss it without trying to keep what's good about it, without trying to keep the foundation. The problem
Why
is,
the foundation? Why can't we just look at things for what they are?
well, we have the foundation right now, in my opinion. The morals that we have are the morals that the Bible teaches, aside from, I mean, if you get into Deuteronomy, there's some really nasty stuff there. I mean, there's obviously problems with
Why do we?
with
So
all
then, why do
scriptures.
we need that? What is the purpose of that?
Why do we need written law?
No, Deuteronomy.
Why can we not just tell each other what the laws are?
The book of Deuteronomy. Why do we need to consult with the book of Deuteronomy on anything?
I don't.
Okay, so that's
I don't. I 100% believe that you can believe in God, a creator, because I do. I believe in intelligent design through evolution. I think there's something. I don't know if the God is such a hard word to use, because it could mean anything.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that there have been people who are, we can say, divinely inspired. I don't want to say like trigger words as a Christian, but I think that there is guidance, the same guidance that has controlled evolution all the way through it. And now I lost my train of thought and I forgot where I was going.
Well,
But
I would say, like, for me, I think Lou touched on something really profound, and I've just been thinking about it while we're having this conversation, which are all making really good points. But the thing that Lou said was that, you know, the difference is that it sort of superimposes on your psyche, you know, which is like the Greek word for spirit, you know, the spirit of people, you know, the mental world of people. And that's where the danger comes in, because what happens, what I see, my perspective, just by, you know, studying these things and going through my own personal journey, is that you know, on one hand, you know, religions have a lot of profound value for many people. So let me just start off by saying that, first of all, they do offer community, meaning, ritual, identity, you know, ethical guidance, you might say. But psychologically, they can also create a lot of significant internal conflict, like when they foster attachment and rigid dualistic frameworks. Like, these dangers aren't really just inherent in spirituality itself. They sort of arise from how the human mind kind of relates to this whole thing about belief, right? So, like in psychology, you know, attachment refers to clinging to beliefs or roles or group identity, and so strongly that they become someone's self concept, right? Like, if I stop believing this, then who am I? If my religion isn't true, then my entire life collapses. Or I'm only good and lovable if I adhere to these particular beliefs or something like that.
sure.
And so it's kind of unhealthy in that
Yeah.
way. And so
Well,
attachment to sort of absolute truth claims, they generate chronic insecurity, is what I think happens.
I don't know. See, because you can look at attachment, you don't need religion just for that. That's really comes down to the person, because for some people, their religion is their spouse or their children or their
Yeah,
vices. You know what I mean?
When I
But
mean religion, I mean organized, like your world
sure,
religions, your organized world religions, like Islam, you know, Christianity, Catholicism, what have you, you know, those sort of things. But yeah, you're exactly right. Your religion, you know, is can be anything. It's whatever you attach yourself to. And so
right.
that principle of attachment really applies across the board. Like for me, I've kind of went on a journey towards non-dualism. And so I've kind of like fostered that in my life and everything like that. I even wrote a book and recently released it last night. And so it actually talks about applying non-duality, explains what is non-duality and
Yeah,
how
I'd
do
have
you
to read
apply
that
it.
myself.
Yeah, like
I
how
don't
do
know
you,
what
yeah, yeah.
non-duality is.
I just put the book in the link.
It's
But
from
they-
Descartes kind of started dualism, and then it kind of become a movement along with the Cartesian theater. These are things to look at, but Kant started the kind of dualist, or he defined it. It was already
Idealism.
around. Yeah, it was already around, but the ideal is that there are two different components of the brain and the consciousness. Yeah, I'd encourage you to do a little reading on the subject and be familiar with it. Honestly, even before you read this gentleman's book, because you should probably really know what dualism
Honestly,
is.
for me, a lot of that kind of gets into the problem with religion, with watch a lot of debates and a lot of that, like diving into that and trying to put labels on everything. I'm this sort of atheist. I'm agnostic. This. You know what I mean? To me, it's the same with Christianity. To say if you're a Christian, you believe this. It's a label that doesn't need to be specific. I believe that you can be a Christian, a follower of Christ, and not be any denomination, not belong to any church, not follow any rules that you don't agree with. You know, I don't think that I'm alone in that. I think that most people, unless they have that psychological need for attachment, you know, where they don't have it their self, you know, they don't have a solid idea of their self, then I don't think that, again, boils down to just religions. That can be anything. But I
Well, the
think that
self,
Scott,
Yeah.
just before you go, I wanted to tell you that was not a dig on your book. Your book may be amazing. I just think that no one should start getting into a not position before they understand the affirmative position. So if the book is deconstructing from that, somebody might not really get anything about that until they know what the subject is, and then they'll know what the not argument is.
yeah. So that's an interesting way that you put it. The not argument. So non-dualism doesn't really um, say that things aren't, that there's this not sort of thing. That's why I had to or write a book, because I get a lot of questions about that. It seems kind of contradictory. You know, part of our language is very dualistic. So right off the bat, when you start using dualistic language to explain non-dualism, you're going to run into a bunch of paradoxes. And so you're not really getting the full import by just saying, oh, you know, everything's one thing. It's like, yeah, but then then why are we talking? Why am I talking to you? You know, you're not me, right? So you're already contradicted yourself. And that's really not what it's saying. That's not really not what the concept is really about. And so it takes a little bit of depacking, unpacking the terminology and kind of understanding. That's why I had a book and everything. Actually listed it right there in the private chat if you want to take a look. But yeah, it's very interesting. The main thing for me, the value in a non-dualistic perspective is that you don't really get attached to a lot of belief type systems that are damaging and cause a whole lot of, you know, problems for people. You know, it's almost like fear of death. Like a lot of people feel like, well, I'm in my religion because I know I'm going to die. I know my parents are going to die and I'm going to miss them. So why would I want to believe that when you die, you just go back to the dirt? I mean, what's in it? Why would I want to jump into a belief like atheism where there's no afterlife, right?
Yeah,
Like that's just
that's
stupid. Like, so why would I leave my religion to go to such a nihilistic sort of worldview? But you know, a lot of that, you got to understand, a lot of that is based in attachments. It's based in a lot of beliefs and just a lot of ways that you sort of look at things and frame things. And maybe there's another
value
way to look
set.
at that. Yeah,
Value sets, well, like we were talking about
right.
earlier. It's in the value sets. So yeah, fear is a big one too. What's strange to me is it should be noticeable to everyone that the one commonality, the common strand through all religions, no matter whether that's Eastern religion or where that religion arises from, is in some sense every religion you don't truly have to die. It doesn't matter whether that's heaven or that's Valhalla or that's in the Chinese religions, you have these other spiritual planes where the spirit moves around, or you have these reincarnation models or whatever they are. All of the religions, the common strand that they have is you don't truly have to face your end. There is an end coming where before we are not, and after we are, that we won't be. And that fear is paralyzing to many people. And it seems to me that every religion at its very core addresses that first and says, you don't really have to die. And
Right.
it abates that fear, and it pushes it away, that you don't have to deal with that. And that's the greatest retention of every religion, because in that religious context and in that framework, I don't ever have to deal with the fact that I won't be.
You don't have to deal with your fear of
Right.
mortality,
That's
I'm sure that's where those started. But
that's still our
what's
core.
interesting in that, I
it's
don't
in our
know if you
core.
guys have been paying any attention to the studies they're doing on consciousness.
Mhm.
Have you guys
I
seen
know a
anything
lot
about that?
Some older ones.
Right,
I
right.
haven't looked into it since 2023.
Yeah,
if you're going to say
Well,
that's
well, I
older,
mean, it's
but
kind of
that
the
subject matter
same
is
thing,
older.
you know, and that's kind of, I mean, when you look at it that way, that's where I said that there's maybe a lot of wisdom in some of these older religions. I mean, it looks like the consciousness is, you know, kind of made like a quantum existence of information outside of our body, that it doesn't just happen in our mind. And to me, that's a soul, because if you know physics, you know that energy, that information cannot be destroyed, can't be created. So to me, there is wisdom in those older religions. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, but of course we can
Well,
improve
the
on
way
them, obviously, if we've grown at all.
the way I look at stuff like that is that sort of pandering to your fears is kind of like looking at, your identity. Everybody treasures their identity. And the thing about the identity, the ego, the self, the soul, what have you, what we don't really realize is that that's a construction. That's something that you create throughout the story of your life. It's something your brain puts together as
Right.
a seamless story. Now, the thing about consciousness, as any sort of cognitive system, always wants to survive. That's even a single cell is going to migrate to where the energy sources are. It's going to
Hmm.
look for ways to keep going. And multi-cell creatures are going to procreate, and then we're humans. We're made up of a bunch of cells. So no wonder we want to live. We want to see it survive. We want to eat food and drink water and do the things we have to do, because on a subconscious level, we all want to live forever.
Well,
That's
sure.
part of human nature.
Survival's
Well,
in our DNA.
Yeah, and so the whole thing about consciousness is consciousness wants to survive. It wants to expand, and it doesn't want to stop existing. And there's a lot of different ways to look at this, even from a non-dual perspective, that intersects with, say, science. Like you were talking about the quantum, I guess, the quantum field theory. Like
Hmm.
it's an eternal thing where everything is sort of emerges. If that's a little too spooky for people, maybe you can look at something like,
woo-woo.
yeah, a little woo woo or whatever. You can look at something very simple that all scientists sort of build. I mean, any engineer, space engineer, anyone who builds GPS systems are going to rest those assumptions on B theory of time, like B theory, the block universe theory, where really everything sort of exists. Like past, present, future are all equally real. That's one way to look at it. So, like Einstein, who sort of came up with this kind of stuff, when he was at a funeral, I think with a loved one or something like that, she just had a husband die. It says, well, for us physicists, time is just a persistent illusion. You know that actually, if this block theory stuff is correct, all events are equally real. There is no ending to anything. There is no beginning, no ending. It's just all there in the block. And if you think about your mind, I mean, unless you think that your mind is outside of the universe, then your mind is actually part of that same block. And so it also is eternal in some kind of way. So there's all kinds of ways to look at things
Yeah,
that may be
that's a
able to
little
give you a
woo
little
woo for
peace.
me.
Well, I mean, it may be. It just depends
Right.
on what your assumptions are. You know, we live in a culture where we're just programmed to think that certain things are taboo and certain ideas are off limits and looked at as crazy or whatever. And it's always been like that way, you know. But then
Right.
science will come along or something else will come along, philosophy, and we'll just abandon the old paradigms and abandon the old ways of looking at things, and we'll start seeing things a little different. A lot of things are very weird in this world to us, because who guarantees that us apes that have only been on this planet, you know, doing, you know, science or really self-reflection for what, 200,000 years as opposed to billions of years? Who says that us apes have to know everything about reality, right?
Right.
So
Well,
you
we
have
should know
room
that
to,
we don't know.
right, so you have room to be creative, you have room to
Right.
question things and look at things in different ways. And I mean, if you don't if that's not for you, great. But if there's people who need these sort of beliefs, like especially religious people need beliefs of
Right.
afterlives and things. And I'm just saying
Well,
that.
we all need beliefs, but that's one thing I did want to touch on, because that's one of the reasons why I came on here.
Mhm.
Is one of the things, and I'm not saying that you guys sort of follow this behavior, but one thing, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was talking about the Jehovah's Witnesses earlier, I did read the Bible when I was young. You know, I had that little red New Testament that anybody that grew up in the 80s ended up with, you know. One day I was in a little bit of a bad mood. A couple of young kids, Jehovah's Witnesses, came, knocked on the door, opened the door. They were in their, you know, white shirt and tie, bright faced, going to tell me about God. And so I'm like, all right, tell me about God. And I could tell, you know, the one kid was the experienced one, and then he had like his little trainee with him. And so I started picking this kid apart. He was preaching, and I was just picking him apart. And I could watch the look on this kid that was with his face go from, you know, happy, we're out here doing good work, to doubt in his eyes, and then his face fell, you know, and then they left, and I felt pretty satisfied with myself for a bit. And then later I started feeling shitty because I took the light out of this kid's eyes. You know what I mean? And that's carried with me. That had to be 30 years ago. And that's carried, well, about 25 years ago. That's always carried with me in my mind. And there seems to be, especially online with this whole debate culture that we have now, everybody wants to prove everybody else wrong. Nobody is teaching. It's all about saying, no, you're wrong. To me, to do that to somebody, to take away their crutch, even if it is a crutch, you know, even if they are attached to that religion, to take away what gives them joy. We've all got some patina on us. We've all got some gray hair. We got some years in. To take away what gets people through what is a tough life for most people, to me, to take that away from them just to prove that you're right about this and they're wrong about this and they need to believe like you believe, to me, that's cruel. That is not noble
Yeah,
whatsoever. It's not
but you get
honorable.
to own them. You get to own
Yeah, well,
people, you know.
that's what I'm saying. That mentality, I can't stand it, man. I can't
I
stand it.
agree. I agree with it. It's cruel, and that I don't know how long you were in the comms there, but we were actually talking about that before you come
Yeah.
on, and kind of why I came away from the thing for so long. I don't think taking away something just for the sake of taking that away because you don't think that thing is real, and then you have nothing to fill it in. And Sam Harris mentioned this many years ago in a speech, that there's no such thing as the good news of atheism. It's not as if that we have something to replace it with. Everybody has to find their own way in the absence and in the void of that. So it's not like, if there is this thing that is meaningful to you and that it gets taken away, there is nothing inside of the position of atheism or agnosticism that fills that in. But similar to what he said, it is just clearing the space for better ideas to come forward. So
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that's
when
absolutely great.
we're talking about why we believe things or come to absurd conclusions for bad reasons, it's more about fixing the reasoning of why we come to things for for bad reasons. That train of thought and that way of coming to conclusions needs to disappear, because in the same vein, you can come to pseudoscientific ideas, you can come to flat earther. That's a giant movement right now. It really is, though. It's giant, and how much it is connected inside of the Christian apparatus is enormous. The vast majority of that is inside of the Christian apparatus, and they believe that they have biblical support for the flat earth idea. So these kind of things, we need to clear the space to say, why are you coming to these conclusions, and are the conclusions valid? Should we do it in a way that is not trying to take something away from somebody, but rather give something to someone that is a better way of reasoning? Neil deGrasse Tyson talked about the subject of why he doesn't talk about atheism. The reason he doesn't talk about it is because he believes that it is more beneficial to teach people better ways to think than it is to say thinking this thing is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
and in that sense, I would agree with him. But that's why I don't think the debate stage is the best place. I think it's very entertaining. As far as it gets the views, it gets the hits, it's the clickbaity thing. But at the same time, I don't think it's what's best for society. I've seen older conversations with people like Bertrand Russell and the other gentleman he debated on the radio. I forget his name. I mentioned him earlier today even. But when you see these kind of debates that are very, very, they're at the pinnacle of civility, and they have disagreements in what is, but they can fully talk about their definitions. They can say, well, can you elaborate on that definition a little more? And you can get to a place where you understand where this person isn't moving from this position, and you can understand everything. That's how we should have the conversation. But
That's
there
how
is
we learn. That's
I
how
have
you
to
learn.
I have to win. I have to win.
Right.
And no,
yeah, that's how you
not
progress.
Hey, Jeff.
I see the cultural
sir.
problem.
The reason I did this particular stream is because I think that what Robert just said is true. Atheism is not the end all. It's just a starting point, really. I mean, it's a different mindset from the religious mindset. And I feel in order to be a fully developed person, you have to fill your mind with something. I mean, and I feel exactly like you do. There are some people, if you take the religion away, they will be destroyed.
Well,
Because
what's more
they're
important to you guys? What's more important to you guys? Truth or happiness?
For myself, truth. For other people, what's important to me doesn't matter.
So, just to follow up on that, so if you learned something that made you unhappy, it would be worth it.
Yes, for me.
Okay.
But what I prefer doesn't matter for other people.
Mm-hmm.
But there are plenty of people that just want to be not even happy, content. Most people just kind of want to be content. Happiness comes and goes, sadness comes and goes. I mean, sounds like a low bar, but really shooting for content is not a bad way to go. Most people don't care about truth. Well, you guys understand what I'm saying. Most people don't care about subjective truth for sure, which subjective truth is for yourself. It's not for other people. To care about what other people are worried about, that's none of my business. That's none of anyone else's business. If somebody is convinced that Santa Claus exists and they get joy out of that, I'm not going to tell them that Santa Claus doesn't exist.
Right. Like some people would say, well, if someone knew exactly the day I was going to die, I wouldn't want to know, because it would take away meaning in my life or something like that. Some people would say that. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. Like one of the things, I think you mentioned Alex O'Connor, and one of the things he was talking about on a recent interview is he was saying, a little thought experiment. He was saying, well, what if, you only had, 1 day to live, or, a week to live, let's say a week to live. And let's say, one of the things that used to make you happy was making the world a better place through your writing. You wrote things, you left, you wanted to leave stuff behind for when you're gone, leave it for your children, future generations. You were a writer. You had a lot of truths you wanted to get out there. But now you only have a week to live. But also you understand sufficiently that actually the entire world is going to perish in 6 months through like a meteor or something like that.
I seen this one. This is a great video.
Yeah. And he was like saying, so would such a person have meaning in life? Like knowing that humanity is going to be gone in 6 months, he's going to be gone tomorrow or whatever. Where is he going to find meaning? Is he going to even have meaning in life, or is it even something he should pursue at this point? And I'm of the thought that why not? It's like if you can make someone's life better today, even if that person was going to die tomorrow, like, isn't that meaningful? Isn't there a value to that? I don't know. Some people disagree, but
No, I agree. If that's what brings you joy, making someone else's life better, which back to the religious thing, honestly, to me, that's what Christianity should preach. All the rest of the bullshit should just get left out. And Lou, like you mentioned earlier, maybe we know better now, and like I was saying, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. But maybe, who knows? Maybe the right minds get together someday and say, yeah, we're good with this, but the rest of this shit can go, and let's build from here. But to me,
I'm just not seeing the baby in the bathwater. I'm not seeing the value in the set. I truly am not. And the reason that I'm saying that
even if the value is only to believe in something bigger than ourselves.
Well, now I'll say this, to believe something bigger than yourself, I believe is the mark of becoming an adult. I believe it is the singular or genuine mark of becoming an adult, that you have to believe that something is more important than yourself. And I don't believe that someone has truly reached adulthood until they have found at least something that they believe is more important than themselves. Whether that
maybe
is
about
family,
1 in 100 people we see are adults, then, you know what I mean?
And sometimes, like the military, that's a thing that helps young men transition in the army. That's something that they see themselves as a cog in a bigger gear, in a bigger mechanism, and that thing, and that brotherhood, or that ideal, that nation, that thing is bigger than them. But whatever it is, I think the biggest part of growing up and transitioning from childhood into adulthood is saying that there is something more important than me. And
right. That's the only way to learn humility, is to realize
but religion does not have own that paradigm.
Sure it doesn't. But for some people who aren't in the military or don't become parents, there should be something, what for them is bigger than themselves, especially for adults who don't have children, who don't
for
have
Romeo and his story, what was he, 17? Granted, this was a writer that was much older and more developed, but right. even in that case, we've seen young love that has flirted with the ideal for the first time, that another person is more important than they are, and that this is their first coming to grips with the emotional sensation of another external thing is more important to me than me. So, and this is greatly told in the Romeo and Juliet story, but we've seen it in young lovers all the time. So whether it's young lovers, or whether it's having children, or whether it's the army, or just some ideal of freedom that somebody might embrace as a young man, that freedom is important and that freedom's valuable, more than them as an individual.
I had overheard a really interesting conversation this morning in a gas station, and there was this preacher who was like a street preacher, but he was inside the gas station preaching to this other guy. They were both African American guys. So the one preacher guy was telling this other African American that he should turn to Christ, he needs to accept Jesus and all of this stuff. And the black guy, the other guy, he was like, well, I'm into my ancestors. I don't accept Christianity. I'm more about my ancestor worship or whatever. And so then the guy said, well, yeah, but what is that going to lead you to? That doesn't lead you to a life of virtue and this and that. he's like, yeah, I help ladies across the street. You know, if I see an old lady across the street, I'll help her. I do good things to people, and I don't have a problem. I don't need Christianity for that. And the guy's like, well, that's your problem. You're doing it for the wrong reason. It ain't about you. It ain't even about the old lady. It's about God. You know, you're doing all things to the glory of God. That's the reason you do good things. It's not about doing them for you or doing them to even help the old lady. That just comes along with it. But you're doing it because God is your foundation. So it's almost like you have to whack God off at the same time that you're doing something good for somebody else. And I just think that that's just kind of unreasonable. And this is the kind of poison I'm talking about.
Right. And it's there, sure, 100%. But the flip side of that is there are some people who can be a good person, who know what it is to be a good person, who know the rules and can be a good person without God, without that parent or that set rule structure in a book for them to follow or for somebody else to tell them how to do it. And then there's people that can't do that on their own, who need that guidance, who need that hand over their head. The thing is we can't judge them and say, well, they shouldn't need that. They should just be able to do it because they're their own person. They're living their own life. They've got their own shit to figure out, you know?
Yeah, but they have a proselytizing edict though, Jeff. That's that's why I mentioned you might have come in late, but that's why I mentioned the problem. The major problem is that it's not good enough alone that they believe it. They believe that we're supposed to believe it, and they're supposed to teach it in our schools. You know?
Well, right, it teaches that, but it also comes back to kind of what you guys were talking about, where you're not going to say, hey, you're wrong. You can't prove that there's a God or whatever like that, but you come on here, you still want to talk about it. You want to put it out there for other people to hear. For them, it's the same thing. They're putting that out there. And of course, some, or I would say the majority of them, are pushing it like, you know, they're trying to feed you fucking poison. But
think about the cult of MAGA. Think about the cult of MAGA.
I'm not sure MAGA is a cult.
Well, I
heard you guys talking about Trump. Just let me tell you my opinion of Trump. Up front. I'm not a fan. I think he's a big douche, but I think that doesn't mean he can't be a great president, because I think all the presidents that we've had since Reagan are big douches that just hit it better than he does.
Right. But the point I'm trying to make is, like I was speaking, I think this was like 2 years ago, to some MAGA people. And basically, they're also evangelical Christians, of course, and they're MAGA, and they're Trump forever. Now, they told me that if Trump were to say, you know what, we're going to reinstitute slavery, we're going to start incarcerating homosexuals, and they said they'd be all for it. Because
well, then
after all, it's in the Bible. Number one, it's in their Bible.
The Bible talks about slavery, so does the Quran, so most of the other books, because slavery was a thing at that time.
But the danger,
I don't think you'll find anywhere on the Bible that reinforces slavery, but it'll talk about slaves. And actually, I think in a lot of holy books,
in the Old Testament, you will 100%
that reinforces slavery, that says go out and get yourself a slave.
Yes, that gives the edict of how it's done, of how you're supposed to do it for other people that are that you're not supposed to hold.
I'll be fine. I'll be fine in that. Like I said, I started reading the Tanakh, so I'll be fine in that.
This is Old Testament. We get this in Deuteronomy, right?
Definition. And we're talking modern day here. Anybody that believes something like that has something wrong with them.
But that's the danger. Is that what I'm thinking? What my sort of I see as possible is that, you know, MAGA makes up half the country. You know, half the country.
Well, I'll tell you this:
they voted for Trump.
Half the country doesn't want slavery and doesn't want to incarcerate gay people.
No, I agree. That would be a false equivocation.
So, no, that's you. That's like you managed to run into like 0.1% of our population. If you ran into somebody that said they'd be about slavery and incarcerating gay people. 95% of our country does not give a shit if somebody's gay.
See, and I hope that's true
all the time. Just,
What's that?
I mean, I talk to Christians all the time that think, this is definitely something that God would have no problem with.
Well, they need to reevaluate their God. They need to open their Bibles and start reading about
Reimagine him.
only God can judge and stuff like that.
Well, they'll tell you stuff like Jesus said, "Obey your masters as you obey the Lord, even the harsh ones." They'll
Obey those
say,
that have rule over you.
they'll say that be a good slave. Slaves obey your masters as though you're serving the Lord, and masters obey.
Yes, and
be
pay the
kind to your
tax
brother.
collector. Basically, is telling them not to get beat.
Yeah.
So
I'm just saying, a lot of people are weird, and I just don't trust humanity. Like, I don't trust people to really, like, I see that they can flip at the drop of a dime. I don't think that they're that, like, right now we can say, yeah, comfortably, we could all agree, yeah, nobody's really gonna want slavery. Nobody's
no,
really
I'm sure
want,
there's that
Not
1% of
number
people.
to make it realistic.
So
but the last
there's
few
also
years of Trump,
what's funny is there's just as many people who would want slavery as there are people that would want every one of us dead because we're white men.
That's right, exactly.
So
like, you look at the people on the left.
These are extremes. These are extremes. This isn't big groups of people.
But I feel like it doesn't take a whole lot to push this country to one extreme to the other. I think we're already almost there. Like, with the left, like, a lot of people were talking about how Biden, and it started with Obama, but Biden kind of pushed this whole thing about the gender thing and this and that, and a lot of people were just in lockstep to support a lot of the stuff that the left was shoving down the throats of people. Now, I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm not saying I think that's really what happened, but a lot of critics were saying that's what the left did. They actually started imposing this authoritarian sort of thing, and then people on the left say the same thing about Trump. They say the same thing about the right. They'll say, Trump, he's trying to make it so that if you're transgender, all of these rights are going to be taken away from you, and all of these kind of things. And
never said anything like that.
I understand,
but
that's our media now. That's our media now.
We got this back during the Jim Crow thing. We got this from the right saying that the liberals were taking away the rights of business owners because they had to serve black people and whatnot, taking away people's rights because they're forcing people to have to treat people with equality, as if this was always their right to be able to treat someone differently and not with equality to start with, which I just think is the right to not give other people's their right is what you're really defending. And it's just absolutely absurd to me.
And the media loves to run with it. Yeah, they love it.
The problem is we swing too far both ways.
I disagree. I think that you should give people, people should have their own autonomy and be able to have their own freedom to be, if they want to identify as this way or that way. I don't think it has a damn thing to do with the government. It doesn't have a damn thing to do with it. So
I don't think it does either.
Say that you can identify this way or you can't identify, or you can't get insurance if you're identifying as a bisexual or whatnot.
I hadn't heard anything like that, but I think off of the internet, nobody gives a shit about that. Nobody gives a shit if a guy wants to, or if whatever. Nobody really cares about trans women. When it becomes an issue is when people get on the internet and when it's on the news, or when it gets into stuff like trans women in women's sports and stuff like that. That's the only time anybody might really care about it. Other than that, I think it's just something for people to argue about on the internet. I talk to a lot of people and nobody cares about that.
I think a lot of people do. Believe it or not,
I come from a fundamentalist background. They definitely
and I think that a lot of people voted the way they did for Trump because of the trans issues. Like, that was a major part of his campaigning. I mean,
well, a lot of people say it was a freedom of speech thing too, though. A lot of people say that the left was trying to push thought police stuff down people's throat, where they were saying,
they absolutely did. I don't think that could be denied.
Right. And so then the people on the left were saying, if you disagree and you try to make it a freedom of speech issue, you're just kind of hiding your bigotry behind freedom of speech, like it was that's just your excuse, but really
Right.
at the end of the day you want to discriminate. And so there's arguments back and forth, and what I'm saying is the American people are so easily manipulated this way. I'm saying on the left and the right. And so I
Right.
just don't trust it. I'm just thinking, if
Well, you
some
can't.
crazy
What we
authoritarian
get,
got in
you have to
power,
know, right? You have to know it's all being blown out of proportion now. I mean,
well, it's
but
kind of like that movie. Have you seen that movie with Denzel Washington? I think it's called Elijah, the Book of Elijah.
oh yeah,
Where
that's a great movie. Yeah,
yeah, so they used the Bible. Everybody wanted to get a hold of the Bible because
wanted
they
that
knew,
control.
yeah, they wanted to you have something that and this is
Right.
like history. Really, it's like a retelling of history. The church and the government in the Dark Ages did the same thing. They always do that. It's a power play, and
Right.
I
Well,
just see.
like I
I
was
don't think
saying
they.
earlier,
Yeah.
this swings both ways.
Yep.
We've all been around long enough to see it go, back and forth. Whoever's on top, it'll swing back towards the middle, and then it'll swing right, and then the right wants to be the bullies, and then it'll swing back towards the middle, and we'll have the middle a little bit like late 80s, and then it'll swing the other way, and then the left, who were complaining about free speech and yada yada, they want to be the bullies. And I think right now we're swinging back towards the middle, hopefully, but I'm sure it's going to swing too far the other way, and then it's got to
I
swing
want to
back
be
towards
clear
the middle.
about something. I wanted to be clear about something because the majority of any kind of laws or push on the subject of the internet that was made about what we're calling free speech was made over the basis of misinformation, specifically as regard to public health. And we're talking about the vaccinations, and we have people that are saying don't take the vaccinations, that they're going to cause mutations and this, that, and the other. And there's this flat earther level conspiracy nonsense that is
China
affecting
flu.
public health.
China hoax.
Right.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what about that, though.
Origin, not just its
All those
origin,
people
though.
that were saying don't take the vaccine, they turned out to be right.
I completely and utterly disagree.
Oh, you
Completely
do
and
some
utterly.
research, man. Do some
I'm
research.
happy.
Okay.
I'm happy I took the vaccine. Personally.
I took it too. So did my wife. But
It's weird. Like Fox News was peddling these things at the very same time that literally the entire Fox News organization, at an organization level, everyone in the building had to, by mandate of the Fox News organization, take the vaccine shot.
right.
And then
Right.
they all went on camera and peddled conspiracies while every damn one of them had taken the vaccine shot. So conspiracies sell well to the conspiratorial group, but the problem is that it's not good health policy. And what I really wish is that on the internet side, that we would have some accountability to who's spreading this misinformation, rather than trying to control it and saying you can't do that. That we have accountability, and they can't make these claims anonymously and without accountability. Because what we have even now is on Facebook posts. If you look at the Flat Earth Facebook community that like makes daily Flat Earther posts, the majority of these are bots that are not even from the United States.
Right.
They're bots that are constantly running these Flat Earth memes. They don't have anybody on their friends list, and they post at exact same time intervals. I kid you not. There's papers on this, and there's protests to ask Facebook to do like Twitter did, that it shows the country of origin.
Yeah,
where these
what a
come
cool
from.
thing they did. What a game changer on that.
I truly hope that Facebook starts posting the origin, and if there are circumstances where they don't post the origin of the country, I hope that when people start putting things that are conspiracy theory, that Facebook just posts their country of origin. Whether just let it come out, because I think that people from the anonymous seat get to keep whispering in the ear of the internet and society, and they control the levers of power and belief from an anonymous position. We don't even know what country or country interest. Maybe this is just a let's make Americans stupider and have giant server farms of flat earth promotion constantly targeting Americans,
Yeah.
Let me say something. I think that Americans, people, not just Americans, people of all sorts all over the world are very vulnerable to being brainwashed, like extremely vulnerable.
Well, people are. They have it down to a science.
So that's, we agree. So when we're watching let's say, bots. Bots are effective. I've been
Absolutely.
on the internet, for 15 years, and I've been involved in internet, just social media of all different
Mhm.
types. I think a lot of the stuff that I get is bots. And a lot of them are right-wing bots, and a lot of them are Christian bots. and I think that I mean, it doesn't affect me personally, but
Well,
I
I mean,
think it has
it kind of
raised the
does because
moral
it's
regard.
hard to sift through what's real and what's not, and we have a tendency to accept what we agree with or what kind of jives
Yes.
with us as being truth, and just rejecting what we don't, and that's dangerous for all of us.
Look,
If y'all seen how many
I have someone in my neighborhood that will send my girlfriend messages, and she's a beautiful woman. But most of it is just downright misinformation. It's just fake. Right? So
Right.
I mean, I think that people are fooled by the fake.
Oh, absolutely.
Government psyop.
Everybody gets fooled by the fake.
Government psyops are nothing new.
That's one of my problems with the religious element. It's like religion is proselytizing. In America, we have churches that meet every week, and they proselytize, and they bring people in, and their whole agenda is to bring people in. All right. And to me, the people going in there become like brain dead zombies. I mean, they're
I
not
don't know.
even
I don't
thinking
know.
for themselves. They're doing what
I
the
don't know.
pastor says.
But I think that's been organized religion since the beginning. It's been all about
Yes, and I
recruiting.
don't
I mean,
like
the
that.
Catholic Church was like the first mafia. You know what I mean?
Yes, and I agree with you. But
that doesn't
that's
mean
the
that everybody
problem.
in there is brainwashed. It doesn't mean there aren't good people in there.
No, there's
So
good people. Good
yeah.
people are brainwashed. All
Well,
right. It's just
we
Well, I have a theory.
I'm sure on probably multiple things we all are too on different subjects. You know what I mean?
And a lot of guys go to church because their wives make them go. They're not really there because they want to be there. When I was going to church and going to all that stuff, I knew a lot of guys, they couldn't wait to just get home and watch the football game. They didn't give a shit about, they just
or at least that's what they said.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them guys are like, my wife wanted me to come out today, so here I am.
Reprobates, undedicated heathens.
That's right.
I seen the type. I seen the type. I'd go and lay hands on them when I was in church.
When religions have an agenda, and they are literally brainwashing the public, that is a very dangerous thing to me. Okay, and that's
right.
That's
I think everybody is trying to brainwash everybody for control, but religions have definitely been doing it forever. But so it's not just Christianity; it's not just any particular religion. All the cults and governments do the same thing to entire countries.
Yeah,
Islam.
My channel is about trying to get people to be able to express their thoughts freely.
Think for yourself. Everyone should think for yourself. That is a good crusade to be on.
That's
to try to just get people to think for themselves, research for themselves, study. Don't just read social media and make their own mind up.
Islam's
that's one of the reasons I do this channel.
Yeah, that is an honorable goal.
Well, Islam is all
my
about
wife
freedom.
Stopped in and gave me a dirty look like 6 times now. She's ready to go to bed. It's been great talking to you guys.
That
really
nice to meet you,
Jeff. Have a good one, Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff.
Thanks for having me on. You guys have a good December, man. Have a good Christmas.
You too. Thanks for stopping by.
Praise Jesus.
Come now. Yeah.
But
I tell you,
people are brainwashed. Do we all agree with that?
Oh yeah.
Not everybody, but I mean,
I think everybody to some degree. Lou, I never put it past. Remember, I told you my great fear when I came into epistemology is self-deceiving again. And I always worry about it. And I think anybody that's not worried about it is very susceptible to it. And even people that are worried about it are to some degree susceptible. But if they are worried about it, they have some resistance to it.
I think we're all susceptible for sure. All right. But I think that we need to try to critically think and analyze things with a methodology that will eliminate some of that brainwashing. I mean, maybe we can't eliminate it fully, but we need to eliminate it as best we can.
Some of your brains need a good washing. Some of you foul brains out there need a good washing in the Lord Jesus. You know, yeah, I think I agree with Robert, man. A lot of humans self-deceive constantly. It's one of the most well-documented psychological phenomena across philosophy, neuroscience, cognitive science. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's kind of a superpower in a way. We're kind of built that way in order to achieve a lot of things we need to in order to fit in with our communities, and how to cohese with, be more cohesive with each other as a society and stuff like that. So it's kind of like natural, but with anything else, you can take it too far. I mean, we have a sex drive, but it doesn't mean you get to go out and just have sex with more than one woman. That'd be terrible.
Yeah, I've heard the aphorism. That'd be terrible. Yeah, I've heard the You're hilarious. You've heard the
I don't
aphorism.
think that would be so terrible.
You've heard it, the unstoppable force meets the immovable object thing. I tend to think that there are two components of humanity. One is like the internal value system, that we want a thing, and then there is the thing that we know that is the logical thing. So now we have the emotional drive has evolved, and it could only get us so far as to what we wanted and to make us want the things. And then you have the logical side has kind of taken over, and we kind of try to, if we're smart, we let emotion try to take a back seat as far as our decisions and let logic make more decisions. But it seems to me that at the emotional level, we fear death and we don't want to die. But the problem is that unstoppable force, the two that are hitting is the logical side knows that we will. So we don't want to, but we're having to rectify with, but we know for a fact that we will. And that might not be something that enters the cognition of an animal, that it thinks like this, that it thinks in a way that it has to rectify with the fact that it's going to die. But humans are intelligent enough that they do have to rectify with that. So now we have these two things that have to reconcile. And I think that's why religion is birthed in the midst of these two rising mountains, so to speak, that are dealing with, I absolutely, at my core, at my instinct, at everything, I don't want this to be. And at a logical level, I know that it will be.
Yeah, and religion is a product of the human mind. That's how I see it. I mean, and animals, it's interesting because when you look at animals, I don't think they struggle with the things humans do. Like as far as, these issues. When I look at my dogs, they have health problems. One of them has a lot of health problems, but I don't sense that he cares that much about the health problems. You know what I'm saying? Whereas a human being will really care about it a lot.
Yeah, he cares about the oohs and the ahs. It's like, it hurts. I care in that moment. But do I think about it in the long term? The dog does. I don't believe at all. It thinks about it.
They're not even considering it. It's just like, because I think they're living in reality more than a human being does.
They're definitely living in the present moment, which is a very peaceful place to be. But one of the studies I was looking at the other day about schizophrenia was, the reason why people can be schizophrenics. Number one, the one big commonality is brain connectivity, like being too logically minded. Is schizos, you would think that they're imaginative and stuff like that. That's not really the case. The thing about schizophrenia is they try to find logical reasons for things that you shouldn't be looking for logical reasons about. Like, you'll hear a voice, oh, it must be my neighbor. He's got this, they'll construct this whole logical story. Oh, he's got this, special radio thing that transmits signals through the wall, and that's why I'm hearing these voices, and something's got to be done. And I mean, they're really, to themselves, they're just being completely logical. They're trying to figure out what could logically explain these voices that I'm hearing in my head.
Yeah.
Right.
But a lot of that's dopamine, though. It's a dopamine production that
Yeah.
is making them have a variation in patterns to try to find what it is that is most likely the thing. So they're like, no, I got to
Yeah,
get
pattern,
this.
right.
Right. So the problem is the reason that from the medical side, the only reason, whether it's a connection issue combined with dopamine, let's say it's a 40-50 or whatever the dichotomy is, whatever the percentage is, the reason that on the psychology side they're not concerned with the connections is because they can't fucking fix that.
Right.
All they can do is suppress the dopamine production. So they have medication that you can suppress the dopamine production of it, so you can, that's the only way you can treat the schizophrenia,
Right.
is try to get them to produce less dopamine, and then they won't be so prone to find patterns and everything and say, oh, now I'm correlating, making all these false, correlations. So it's just the only way they can treat it.
And you can sort of see a lot of like they say with these geniuses, like these people that are ingenious scientists. Usually a lot of these genius scientists that maybe they'll be a Nobel Prize winner, for discovering one thing, but usually most of their theories and most of their stuff is really kooky and wacky. Like they really come up with some really weird, you can't trust them on a lot of stuff. Like they're real smart, and a lot of people will point to him and say, oh, well, he's really smart because he discovered wormholes, or he came up with the math for dissecting wormholes. Well, that same guy also believes in all kinds of weird stuff that there's absolutely no evidence, like really kooky, out of this world stuff. And but most people just don't give it a thought because they think, they correlate being real smart with always being truth tellers, and that's not necessarily true.
No, you can be brilliant and still believe wacky things, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
That's going to be it for me anyway, Dylan. I'm in about Sam Harris talked on this subject, the divide of the brain, and I've referenced him several times, and it's not like I even listen to him a lot, but he just happens to be someone that addresses a lot of the subjects that we've talked about. But he talked about such a division inside of the brain that you can understand nuclear fusion, yet still believe that when you die, you're going to get 72 virgins. If
right.
You believe in a certain way. That there's such a division in the brain that you can hold things that are absolutely absurd and illogical, yet process things that are entirely logical constructs, that they're non-intuitive things.
We know Sam Harris, he's one of my favorite non-dualist speakers. He's a big advocate for non-duality and stuff like that. So I really like Sam Harris. He's great. And he really puts a point on that some of the most smartest people come up with the most dumbest ideas and say some of the most stupidest things, like a lot of, especially like in areas of philosophy, like a lot of scientists just don't know their lane. Like they start debating, they get into this debate stuff with like Christian apologists, and they start trying to really make these philosophical and metaphysical pronouncements as if oh, it's proven by science that this is the case, and it's like you're doing and they'll say other things like philosophy has no value at all, we should do away with philosophy is just stupid, which is a philosophical statement in itself. So they have no like they it's kind of like a Dunning-Kruger effect, if you will.
Yes, it is exactly what it is. But they think that they have a lot of knowledge in this field, and somehow it's shiftable. Right. Somehow it's shiftable. But it's like the dentist that thinks he can tell you all about plumbing. Okay, I don't want my dentist doing my plumbing anymore than I want my plumber doing my dentistry work. But anyway, exactly. I'm fixing to be out of here, gentlemen. It's been a great conversation.
Hey, thanks, Robert.
Always nice, Robert. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
Man.
Have a good one. Take care.
Yep, you too.
Hey, Scott, I have one question for you I want to finish up with.
Yeah.
Because it's a question I asked you in email, and I just want to, because I'm trying to work through this non-dual thing. Right?
Awesome.
And it does get really deep.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not a surface thing.
I just sent you an email for my book too, so you've got the book already.
Oh,
but anyways, go ahead, ask a lot.
But with the non-dualist mindset, okay, two things. Did this help you when you left religious thought? Was this something that it helped your mentality or your mental well-being?
It could have, had I discovered it at that time. I think if I'd have discovered it back then, it would have been a great help. But because I didn't know about it until, maybe 15, 20 years later down the line, because I really didn't start studying non-dualism till I started listening to folks like Rupert Spira and Bernardo Kastrup and stuff like that. And these folks, I didn't really discover them until around 2010, 2013. And I had left my religion way back in 1994, so I had been out of the religion for many years by that time. But yeah, I've got an entire chapter dedicated to how non-dualism can help you with deconversion, like,
I'm
that
I'm
process.
wondering if the whole theme of what I was thinking about tonight is the idea that when you leave a religion that your identity is in, when you do that, you got to replace it with something, because
Well,
otherwise you have
this
no
well
mental
that
stability.
that
You know?
that can be one path you take, or you can take the non-dual path, which is to do away with identity altogether. So if you can see identity for what it truly is, then it will dissolve away naturally. This whole need and this whole psychological issue is going to dissolve away naturally once you sort of understand what identity truly is, that it's just a construct, it's just a story you told yourself. And once you can get to a point where you're at peace with having no attachment to your identity, then all of that stuff just kind of like doesn't matter at that point. You're like, oh, I see. It wasn't even a problem. It was an imaginary problem.
And the other thing, which is very basic, so I know you'll definitely have an answer to this because it's a basic question, but
Hmm.
it's important for me personally to understand this. All right,
Hmm.
the consciousness thing,
Hmm.
the self. All right, would you agree that consciousness is the self, right, or no?
Well, that can be tricky depending on how you come at it. So generally when I think of the self, I think of that identity, the ego. So I think of the self as Scott, like the self. If you're going to ask me, well, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Well, my name is Scott. I'm an IT person. I do this, I do that. I'm 6 feet tall. I work out. And you start talking about behavior and your history and your values, and you start telling a story. And that's what the self is. The self is a story that has been
Okay.
created. Now, then there's another way of looking at it, because this is sort of, there's a non-dualistic teaching called anatta, which is called non-self, is what it means. It's the teaching of non-self. It basically tells you there is no self. All there is an experience. So the only thing you really know is an experience. And from the experience, you build anything else, any sort of inferences, storytelling, observations, things of that nature. So the real nature of who you are is not an identity or a self. The real nature of you is consciousness, an experience. And when I say consciousness, I mean just a raw um, I amness. Like,
Well, isn't consciousness? This is the big thing for me personally.
mm-hmm,
Consciousness, or and yourself, both of those things that we're describing are for living beings. Do you agree with that?
mm-hmm,
Okay, now for for beings that die,
mm-hmm.
do they have consciousness or a self anymore? I don't think so, and that's what I don't know if that aligns itself with.
No, I
You
mean,
know,
I wouldn't want to dogmatically tell you what non-dualism would teach about that, because you can be a non-dualist and have all kinds of beliefs about all kinds of things. But I think to be a more pure, if you're a hardcore non-dualist, then you're going to be someone who doesn't believe there's a self to begin with that dies. You're going to
Okay,
believe that
but you
all there
believe
is
in consciousness.
yeah, consciousness. And if all there is consciousness, then an experience goes on, maybe not through your identity, but it goes on like right now through me, right now through you. When you die, more people are born. It's sort of like it's a phenomena that's always there. It's almost, maybe one way to put it would be to say you don't have consciousness, consciousness has you. You know, consciousness expresses itself through beings, through life. That's how consciousness expresses itself. It's kind of like electricity. You know, electricity comes in many forms and it expresses itself in different ways for different things, depending on the system that it supervenes on. So it's kind of like that with consciousness. The way I view it is that consciousness is more fundamental than being or life, because those are concepts that arise within consciousness. Consciousness is the thing you need in order to make any sort of beliefs
See,
or
when
proclamation
you're
or
talking
anything.
like that, my mind goes, "Ooh."
That's why you got to read the book. The book may
Yeah,
do a better treatment because
but here's
it's
the thing: when you die, this is the thing. Now, maybe it's because I just see things, as
through a lens.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
seeing it through a religious lens, and I understand. So
Well, I mean, when
I
you
would.
die, all
Mhm.
right, do you feel that your consciousness or self or and self are going anywhere, or do they cease to exist? I think that they cease to exist.
Mhm. Mhm.
Do you agree with that or no?
Yeah, because it was never really existing in the first place. So that's what I'm saying. It's like all of this stuff about ourselves and where are we going, in your language you're already making a sort of belief about an I-ness. You're saying I, and you're attaching that I-ness to some sort of personal story. But consciousness itself is just the thing that arises within reality in different ways. So it's kind of hard to say, will consciousness end? I mean, for you, of course, because you are, you know what I'm saying? It's like, of course, you're not going to, if you're asking me, like, is there this inside soul that floats off from your mind, or like, are you this little person inside your brain, like this little homunculus behind your eyes? No, that's a story you've told yourself, or that's a story we've been told.
Well,
Such a thing doesn't exist. That
I
that
think
doesn't
there
exist.
is no such thing as that. So,
Right, right. So
I don't
you've
think
got it.
that exists. I don't believe personally. I don't see that I'm outside, or I'm inside my body, or I'm inside my brain, or
Hmm.
any of that. I don't see any separation.
And why do
I
you?
see it as being
Let me ask you some questions. Why do you believe that's not the case?
comes back to the evidence. I see no reason to believe that. I see no reason to believe that there's anything that is a self or is conscious once an individual is dead.
Well, right, and I agree. Like the structure of your pattern. Like I see consciousness as a pattern. It's like a pattern in your brain or a pattern in your body. If you're a dog, you're a pattern in that body, in that brain or that mind. So consciousness, more fundamentally than the body that it expresses itself through, is just a pattern. It's a pattern that comes in many forms, you know. And once you're gone, you're gone. That pattern dissipates. It loses its structural integrity. It's no longer a viable pattern that can be expressed or known in any kind of way. And so it no longer exists. It's just a pattern of potential, like that expressed itself. And so it's the way I look at it, is kind of like, you've got an ocean. Let's say when you're on anesthesia, like I was under anesthesia um years ago. I had some work being done on my tooth, and not my tooth, it was something else. It was my heart. I had a heartburn situation. And they had to put this tube down my throat to put this little thing in my stomach, and I had to go out. So I had to go through anesthesia. Now, when I went through anesthesia, this is what it was like. I was awake and I was counting the guy's finger. He goes, "I'm going to count to 3 and you're going to be out. 1, 2," and then I was waking up. So at that time, there was like a break in time. But for everybody else, the clock kept on ticking. The clock kept ticking. They were seeing my body, they were working on me, doing the thing. As far as I'm concerned, I was checked out. I was gone. My consciousness was gone. As far as I can't remember anything about what happened, right? But the odd thing about that, the thing that really struck me as kind of odd, is that, hey, it's almost like my consciousness went out of my body. And then when I came to, it just came back. So all my memories, all my character, my values, the things that I like, my tastes, all the things that I like, somehow just reboot like nothing ever happened. Like, how does that happen? It's almost like that pattern just reapplied itself. Once it was allowed back in, it just reapplied itself to this body as Scott, as who I am, as who I identify with my stories, my memories, and all of it. And so that kind of clued me into the nature of consciousness. It's kind of like, let's say you've got an ocean, and the ocean is very still, and the sunlight, the moonlight shines on the ocean, right? But then let's say a storm comes. This is the anesthesia. A storm comes. All of a sudden, you have all these tumultuous waves. So no longer is it reflecting the moon. It's no longer reflecting the sun or the stars. It's just all in chaos. And then once it settles down, it goes back to reflecting the sky again, And it's kind of like, that's how I look at consciousness. We're in an ocean, a field, and our beingness is kind of like that smoothness. But once we die, or once we go under anesthesia, for example, maybe we go into a deep sleep every night, we turn into we lose all structure. We lose our structural integrity, and we're gone. We're annihilated. We're out of here. But then consciousness, once that structure is put back together coherently, then it's able to express itself. Now, scientifically, this is supported. There's a theory called integrated information theory, and it's one of the more popular theories of science, the science of consciousness. And what it says is that consciousness is treated as a fundamental, kind of like that ocean. And it says that once you reach a level of phi, which is how much information can be integrated, then consciousness will be somewhere on a spectrum. So it's, you have ant consciousness, bat consciousness, dog consciousness. It's all on a spectrum, and we're humans. So we're on that part of the spectrum as a human being. So that's all from structure, from integration of information. So what they're pointing to, what science is pointing to, is that consciousness is sort of like an informational pattern, like an informational field. And when it supervenes on a system that's able to express, like, this is the whole thing, like they're using IIT, the integrated information theory, for doing AI. Like with these new computers, they're saying how computers will one day be conscious. Well, some people think they're already conscious because they have this structural integrity. Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't necessarily believe that, but maybe one day it will be conscious. Who knows? But it's based on how they are able to integrate information. And that's where consciousness will sort of supervene onto that system as a fundamental. And the reason this makes more sense is because this whole story about, well, consciousness sort of emerges out of the brain or out of stuff, that doesn't make any sense. It has too many problems. It doesn't work. It doesn't explain anything. It's sort of like a placeholder. It's just a
Well,
story we've been told.
let me say this. I think that, I mean, this is just the way I've been thinking about it. Consciousness is, to me, the product of a functioning brain. That's it. I mean, if your brain isn't functioning, right, if it's dead, I see there is no more consciousness, at
So,
least on an individual basis.
so
I mean,
if that's
there could be,
true,
there's still consciousness for someone who's living, all right? But once
here's
you're dead, your brain no longer functions. You have no more thoughts. There are no patterns going on. That's
mhm.
all over.
Well,
It-
if we're consistent with that, then we would say that radios produce music. But we know that if you have a radio and you bust the speaker out, you're no longer gonna have music coming out of that radio. And
yeah,
so somebody like a tribesman somewhere who's never doesn't understand radio waves, cell towers, things like that, they'll say, "Oh, this radio here, it produces music." So, and we know this to be the case because when we break the radio, no more music comes out of it. But we know that the radio doesn't produce anything. The radio is just a system that modulates signals. And so when the signal comes into the radio, it can work as long as the radio is structurally has structural integrity. As long as it's a system that's working, like it has electricity, it has the speakers all connected, it has the band, the radio band to pick up on the signal. But you need more than just the radio to have the music. You have to have the cell, you have to have the cell tower, you have to have the radio waves, and you have to be able to tune into that channel, because the music doesn't come from the radio, it comes from the radio station. And so the brain analogy that way, if you just thinking it's only possible that consciousness comes out of the brain, then you're kind of you could be making a big mistake in that, because that's what we call the hard problem of consciousness. Like a lot of people say, well, because the brain is correlated with consciousness, it's correlated with a lot of behavior that shows conscious behavior. People make the rookie mistake and say correlation equals causation. That's a logical fallacy. And so people who take this stuff very serious go and they say, well, yeah, well, if there's ways to test it. So if the brain actually does cause consciousness, we should be able to see why there's a conscious experience with this correlation. And so far, there's absolutely no theory at all on the table that will explain how the brain creates consciousness. That's called the hard problem of consciousness. And it's never been solved ever for hundreds of years, thousands of years.
yeah.
But now with the advent of these new theories like IIT, integrated information theory is one, we're able to test it out. We're able to say, look, we've got experimental evidence that you can actually, consciousness will sort of emerge once you have this integrated system. But the system itself is responding to something more fundamental, kind of like a pattern. Michael Levin, who's a biologist, he studies consciousness within humans, within brains, and also within single cells, even cellular animals. And he says, and he shows in his work, that these things develop intelligence by latching on to what he calls a bioelectric pattern. And it's kind of like a free lunch that nature gives you to sort of energize a cell to act intelligently, have goal directed goals, to be intelligent, to actually do intelligent things. And so his whole theory is that no, intelligence doesn't just sort of magically come out of the structures. No, the structures are there and are being supervened on by a pattern of bioelectricity. And so the pattern is out there in the ether, so to speak. And it's just that we latch on. So that's consistent though with a non-dualistic sort of perspective that would say consciousness and the structure are all one thing. It's integrated. So that's my view on that.
Well, very complicated.
Oh yeah, it is very complicated.
Very complicated. The bottom line is, what do you think once you are dead and your brain is not functioning anymore?
Mm-hmm. Oh, Scott no longer exists.
Okay,
Scott is
so
gone. All his memories are gone. All his wants, desires, all of those things are no longer existing because that pattern has dissipated. That pattern has you know um been annihilated pretty much. That's it's not to say that the patterns can't be sort of what's the word? I don't know. I don't know the word that I'm trying to.
well, the bottom line is you are on the same idea that I'm on, is
Yeah,
that once you die, you no longer are a
live.
person. You're no
Yeah,
longer, you don't have personality.
right.
You don't no longer have an identity other than a memory. If you're gone, I might say, "Oh, I remember Scott," right?
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
But,
One
but you're not here anymore. I
like
mean,
with here's an experiment to kind of give you a clue. So butterflies, they come from larvae. They start off as larvae and they sort of transform into a butterfly, right? You know that
metamorphosis.
yeah, metamorphosis. Yeah, it turned. So what they did, and this is going back to the work of Michael Levin. So like Michael Levin, what he did is he trained this larva. He trained it to look for food in a certain area, to do certain activities, and it learned how to do it. He trained it, and it did this. Then we all know that when the larva transforms, that it loses its structure, it loses everything. Its brain or whatever, its nervous system is totally changed. It's totally a different thing when it becomes a butterfly. And most biologists believe that yeah, the butterfly becomes a new thing. It's kind of like a mother giving birth to a child. It's its own being. The larva is gone. It's dead. But what they found out is that after training, learning how to train the larva, the butterfly remembers where to go to get this food, where to go do all the things it was trained to do as a larva stage. So that created a big mystery. Like, why is it that this thing did that? What it's there? It's just kind of weird because there's no brain left, and it's the same thing they did with this other thing. They're called flatworms, and with the flatworms, they train this flatworm to get food and to do different things, to move in certain ways, behave a certain way. And they cut the flatworm's head off and killed it, threw it away. So it grew a brand new brain with a brand new set of neurons, fresh, brand new. Guess what? The thing remembered where to get the food, where to get to all the things it was trained, which was it flew in the face of what we understand about how these things work. And so this is why they made that connection that bioelectricity seems to be the cognitive glue that sort of expresses these same patterns within these same beings. As long as you're the same being, you can express the same memories, characteristics, and everything like that. But once that being is gone, I'm afraid there's no longer that pattern to exist. you know. But the butterfly thing does kind of question that, because the butterfly is a brand new pattern. It's a brand new structure, a brand new being, yet it remembers. But there's some kind of connection there, though. There is a connection there from the larva stage to the butterfly. So my thinking is, when I die, when Scott dies, there's going to be no memory. There's going to be nothing else there, as far as I know. So I'm really agnostic on that. I don't see how that's possible. But you know, it does tell me, it clues me into the nature of consciousness, though, itself, that it's more like a pattern that integrates itself into any sort of system, as long as it's sufficient to do so. You know what I mean?
Well, does your consciousness die?
I don't think consciousness dies. No, I think consciousness, there is no, I think consciousness is non-local. That's the whole thing about it. Consciousness, your particular experience as Lou is local to your body, to your brain, to your vision, to your perceptual organs. It's local in that way. But the consciousness, the awareness, the what I would call the phenomenal. See, I'm making a distinction here. I'm saying that you've got the mind, which is local. You've got a mind which is local, and then you've got phenomenal consciousness. That's just the neutral experience itself. And that, I would say, I would argue that you could see that as sort of infinite. And what I mean is that the mind is limited. In other words, we can make a distinction here. So the mind, like the Lou, you know, I'm Lou, I'm having this experience, these thoughts, these things come and go. They're in, they're out. They're limited. It's limitation. But you can know for certain about your phenomenal consciousness. If you were to really think about experience itself, where is the limitation? Like if you were to close your eyes and just think for a while and just kind of meditate on that, and just kind of pay attention to your conscious state, that I'm hearing, I'm seeing, I'm feeling, all of these things come and go. But there's this experiencer, there's this observer, this observing the feelings that are coming and going. That thing never leaves. It never changes. It's just there. It's just like the screen of perception. It's kind of like the movie screen itself. The things in the movie change all the time, but you have access to the phenomenal consciousness at any time if you want. You just pay attention and you see yourself thinking. You're the observer. Who is it that's seeing the thinking? Who is it that's observing the observation? You know, if you pay attention to that, you'll start to see that that part has no boundaries. It's just something that everything is inside of that thing, that phenomenal. That's a way to conceive of it. And so in that way, it's sort of the ground of being, of your being. That's the ground of your being. And so everything else comes and goes. It's limited. It's, yeah, your mind will die off. But this phenomenal consciousness thing, I think, is always there. It's just, that's the ground of what being is. And that's what a lot of thinkers in philosophy, a lot of people can call it all kinds of things. There's people, they call it idealism. People can call it panpsychism. It's just a way to kind of recognize that phenomenal aspect of reality, right? And it's also a way to kind of make sense of this hard problem. This hard problem is sort of something we created for ourselves, because we have our culture and language, this dualistic language that says, oh, there's this material stuff, and then there's this experiential stuff. And the material stuff is more primary than the experiential stuff. But the problem with that is you only know of the physical stuff inside of the experiential stuff. So it's kind of like you're going to a movie theater, and let's say you were watching a movie, this screen of perception, and you see on this science fiction movie this brain, and they tell you, oh, that brain explains the movie. That's where the movie comes from. It emerges from that brain inside the movie. Well, that's the exact situation we're in when we start doing observations like that. We start putting the cart before the horse, you know, and because we're so we have mind blindedness because we give so much credence to what's in our experience that we take it too serious. We start to conflate the map with the territory, and we think that the um the locations sort of emerge out of the map. You know,
What's the end of it all? Where does it all end?
I mean, all it really is, it's all it is just a little shift. It's just a small shift. It's just to say what's more logical, what seems to be more um, consistent with our experience.
Well,
If
can you be tackling an issue that is just not knowable? Because I feel really comfortable with saying I don't know.
yeah,
So
that's the work of philosophy is not to come to a conclusion. You know that, right? Like
yeah,
philosophy, the game of philosophy is never to come to a conclusion and say, this is the end, this is the capital T truth of the matter. That's
yeah,
not the game of philosophy. The game of
no,
philosophy is to question your assumptions,
yes, and
always to question your
to
assumption and
give
leave, yeah, and leave a bit
different
open.
frameworks. It's giving different frameworks to think about things.
That's all it is.
That's
And
how I look at philosophy. I don't
right,
think philosophy proves anything. I
it's not
mean, and
supposed to.
oh,
It would be it would be counterintuitive. It would be counter to the project. It's kind of like science also is not in the business of proving anything either.
yeah,
Science is just there to see what we can learn and see how things behave until other evidences come along to refute it. Philosophy is just there to ask the questions and to do a comparison and analysis. So, like, if you were to ask me, well, why non-dualism over dualism? I could give you the more, I would give you my metaphysic of non-dualism as more, um, you know, virtuous. You know, I would have like it's more parsimonious. It explains more things. It's more internally consistent. Things like that, and we could compare those two to see which one passes the smell test on that. And for me, non-dualism came out the winner on that. Now, that's not to say that I know that's the truth. You know, the only thing I really know is that that I exist, that I'm having an experience of existing.
and that's
Because
what we would call consciousness, right?
right, and that's the only thing you know for certain is that you exist and you're experiencing that existence. Because if you didn't know that, or if that wasn't true, you couldn't be asking the questions. You couldn't be here to even talk about any of that stuff. You know, even to doubt your existence requires that you exist. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know many people that doubt their existence.
Exactly. But you know, a lot of people, this goes back to the blind spot in our culture, in our language creates this blind spot, is that we don't take that serious enough. We, you know, if we're going to engage in philosophy, you know, we're going to say the only thing I know is that I exist. But then what happens is you have the endeavor of science, like in our culture, right? Every science is everything. It's all about facts. It ain't about feelings. It's all about facts. It's about what you can prove, bro. You know, and then what do? They make observations and they make maps. And so then it's got to the point where the map is more important than the territory. You think that the map is what's more real than the territory itself that it's describing. You're just describing an experience. That's all an observation is an experience. So to say that the experience comes out of the map that we use to explain the experience is just ass backwards. And so that's the blind spot that we're in. And most people can never wrap their heads around that because we are so indoctrinated as a culture into our dualistic language, into our virtues of science and technology and all of it, which is great stuff, by the way. It's all great stuff and it works. That's not what non-dual is, not denying any of that. It's just that we're trying to let you know that philosophically, it's the other way around. It's just a shift in your perspective. That's all it is. It's just making a different premise. It's just turning it around. That's all it really is. But even doing that is so hard for people to do. I can see even you may struggle with that, like I did, like everybody does, because we come from the same culture. We come from the same language reflects concepts. It reflects the way we think. So the way we think is always in dualistic terms. We think like the thing out there is more known than what's in here. Like we forget that out there is actually in here too, you know. And
Well,
so
is there a question or two that you would ask somebody that you could determine if someone is dualist or non-dualist? Like, is there a couple of simple questions? Because I don't know what I am. I don't know.
Yeah. You would say you could ask, well, like you were saying, is there a difference between the mind and the body? Are they two different categories? Are they two different? I wouldn't even say categories because they kind of are two different categories, but categories are also in one concept. So you could ask somebody, do you think that consciousness comes from, matter? And if so, how? You could ask somebody that, like, how does consciousness come out of, like, or even better, why is there that correlation? Why is there a correlation between a conscious experience and dead matter? Like, what's the demarcation line? When does it magically kick in? And
Well,
people will tell you.
I've always felt like an answer to that question is consciousness comes from a fully functioning brain. That's my answer to that question. So is that dualist or not dualist?
Yeah, that's a dualist. That's a dualism.
That's a dualist thought?
Yep, because it's making a separation, because you're separating the brain from the thing it produces. So you're saying that the brain causes the consciousness, is to say, there's this, they're two different things. There's this matter, and then there's
the matter
the
would be
experience.
the brain.
Yeah, the brain is not the experience, and the brain is the tool. It's the meat machine you need in order to produce the it's kind of like the stomach and digestion. The stomach is your guts and all of that, but then what it produces is the digestion. So these are two different things. This is the dualistic way of thinking. So
Well,
if you were to
what
say,
would be the non-dualist take on that? Would it be that my brain is my consciousness?
no, your brain is an appearance in your consciousness. It's what
Brain-
appears. Yeah, it appears as an experience. It's the brain. You could see your brain in an X-ray or an fMRI or something like that. In this brain appears in your experience.
So it all hinges, if tell me if this is correct. It hinges on how you see material versus non-material. How you parse that out in your mind.
Yeah, like there's the mind and then there's the world, two separate things. There's for a non-dualist would say experience is simply appearing. It's not located inside something, right? It's appearing within something, within you. It's that all of this stuff is appearing within you. And that's really what you know to be true. If you think about it, you're never outside of your mind to see things as they are. You're only inside your mind. Your mind is the interface to the outside world. You're never outside of your mind to make to conclude, oh, I see, there's two things. No, you're only inside your mind. That's what it is.
Your mind, I see, when I say my mind, I'm talking about my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I'm not talking about anything else.
Well,
And
who observes your thoughts? How do you know your thoughts?
who observes my thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
I think thoughts are just, they are what they are. I don't know if anyone's observing them.
Well, who do they appear to? Like if you say, I see my thought, I'm thinking of this. If
Yeah.
you're thinking of something, who is that for?
Well, I think if I'm thinking something,
it's not appearing to me.
Without expressing anything, I would say I'm the only person who is aware of my thoughts.
So you've got two different things there. You've got the thought, and then you've got the I that is aware of the thought.
Yeah. How would it work the other way?
Maybe you are the thought.
Well,
maybe it's all combined.
But you're ultimately,
you know what I mean?
I hear you, but isn't that just coming to an I don't know thing again?
No, it's coming to an I know.
Don't know that,
but you do. But you do.
We're coming to understand something a certain way. That's all I'm seeing. I mean, I don't think there's, it's like that hard problem of consciousness. It's like, you can see it one way, or
the hard problem
see it another way.
Well, the hard problem of consciousness only exists if you're a dualist. But if you're a non-dualist, there is no hard problem of consciousness. That's the whole point.
Well, yeah, you're eliminating it in your thoughts.
Well, in your experience.
Doesn't necessarily. I mean, that's what I'm trying to get to. I seek truth. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I will put things like that in an I don't know category and be comfortable there.
But I don't understand what you're saying. So
for my own mental well-being, right?
Well,
for my own mental well-being, I put something like that I think of it as something I do not know, and I'm comfortable.
What is it? What is it you don't know?
I don't know if it's the dualist way at that level of I have a thought. Am I outside of my thought, or is my thought me? Right.
So how do you?
I don't know the answer to that.
What is your experience when it comes to thinking, observing? How would you describe that?
The thinking is not even something that is all directed by me, right? So in other words, if I'm thinking, I'm not directing everything, all right? So the thought is part of me. I mean, is that,
So that's what I'm trying to get at. So when you're referring to a me, so who is the me? Where is that at?
That's my consciousness or my thoughts. That is me.
But you hear what you just did. You just described the me and referenced another me. So if I say, who is the me? And you say, well, it's my this. Well, that's what I'm trying to get to. What is the my? What is the me? What is the I? What is that part, as far as you understand it?
As far as I understand it, that would be self and consciousness.
Right.
If I have no thoughts, then I'm not conscious.
Bingo. Bingo. So the me is consciousness.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think you
I
know
could
that.
be there.
I think
So
you know that.
if I'm there, does that make me non-dualist?
Yeah. Yeah. Because then you're no longer separating out the me from the consciousness part. You are the consciousness. And then everything that you think, everything that you perceive is inside you, which is consciousness. Because you and consciousness are synonymous.
Can't we say that's life as well?
Well, of course. Sure.
So no
That's
life. I mean, this is the part where I think you disagree, and I don't know why. If we could say that's life, and I say, well, if I have no life, then I have no consciousness.
that's right. That's right. Because consciousness is life. Consciousness is life.
Yeah, okay.
Consciousness is the thing that is the first primary of life. That's what I mean by being. When I say that consciousness is fundamental to being, I mean consciousness is fundamental to life. And life can be described from you, me, dogs, cats, single cells, anything like that. Anything we call life, anything that qualifies as a life. And the other thing is I don't really believe in all these category errors and categories of things. I think everything is on a spectrum. And so life is on a spectrum. You've got simple to more complex life, but experience itself, the consciousness embeds itself in all of those forms from the bottom to the top. It just expresses itself in the system in which it supervenes on. You see, like if it supervenes on a cat, it's not going to think like Lou or me. It's going to do cat stuff. It's going to think like a cat. It's going to be after mice or whatever they do. You know, and if you're a human, you're going to have human consciousness or human life. And so, yeah, you're just agreeing with non-dualism that the I, you're identifying with consciousness, which is the core of your being. That's the fundamental thing. It's not your thoughts, it's not your story, it's not the constructs. Those things appear within yourself. You see, they're
I mean,
part of you.
I could go there, but I'd say in practical ways, when we're starting to describe the world around us, we go into describing them dualistically quite often.
We have no choice. That's our language. Like I was talking a while back, I think on one of my programs, I think you were there, and I was talking about how the church, like even not even just the church, it goes way back to religious thinking in the Middle East, is this dualistic language. That's how they spoke, because that was reflecting their concepts of God. Like you had
Mhm.
the creators, the polytheistic gods, you had all these different gods. They were separate. And then you had the creation, which was separate from God. And mankind was different than the womankind. And then he had his chosen people, as opposed to the people that were the enemies of God's people. They weren't God's children. And so all of this language, we've just adapted it. Even till today, we talk about, in dualistic terms. And it's pretty much been helpful in many ways, because it's how we actually do observation. We kind of take that on board, and we say, look, if you tweak with nature this way, it does that. We make these predictions. So we've got technology, we've got medicine, we've got all these great things. But that says nothing about metaphysics or philosophy. That just says about the appearances, what appears in each and everybody's conscious appearance, you know. And so that's how the dualism makes sense in a non-dualistic sort of context, if you will. And it's very confusing, because
Yeah, but if it
very
does
confusing.
that,
Yeah.
if that's the position that humanity is in, All right,
Yeah.
you can see, let's say, non-dualism, but you're still acting dualistic.
Dualistically, yes. There you go. Perfect, perfect, exactly. And that's the other thing I go in the book is like dualism as a category is extremely important to find meaning, to find values, to understand everything. But you know, it all collapses into one thing. It's kind of like we were talking about earlier. You know, you've got the light and the darkness, but everything is defined by its opposite. The Republicans, the Democrats, you know, the religious, the non-religious, they all depend on each other.
Yes.
So in a way, they're all connected into one thing. It's just that the relations are different. We can talk about how everything relates, but ultimately they're all just one thing. Ultimately, everything, if you just widen it out to a universal perspective, everything is just one reality. There's
Now,
not like
is this indicative or uh, shown in the yin and the yang?
yes, yes,
Okay, so
that's
it's a Buddhist type of
correct. That's
concept.
where I right. That's where I derive it from. Ultimately, is like from Buddhism and Taoism. You know, it's like non-dualism. That's the root of it. You know, and then it was just later on reiterated through different philosophers in the West, like Descartes was a dualist, but then you had people like Berkeley and Kant and Schiller, different philosophies through time, Carl Jung, people like that. They started to really teach non-dualism in a Western way. So they had like an analytic way of taking it to where you know that influences like psychology, and that's where we get theories like identity theory. Like people, you know, turn around and say, yeah, we don't believe in emergence, we believe that consciousness is the brain, it's the process that the brain's doing, which leads to theories like integrated information theory, where everything's integrated now with information. So you'll hear a lot of scientists talk about information, like fundamental information. You've got this Max Tegmark who says reality is just information. Like, what does that mean? What does information mean? Like,
I
a
don't
lot of
know.
people are like, why are they so vague with it? Like, whenever they get vague, people start questioning, like raising their eyebrow. They're like, yeah, it sounds good, but then if you really dig deep, what the fuck do you mean by information? And so what they're talking about is distinctions. They're talking about, you know, something is informative when you can compare it to something else. And so they said at base, there's like this asymmetry that collapses into one singularity. But from that singularity, things get expressed through relations. And so these relations make up what we call information. So you've got quantum information, and you have all of this sort of talk about that in AI, and people use it to say, well, you know, if we just integrate information in our AI systems, consciousness will supervene on them, and then you'll see it. Then other people say, well, actually, consciousness supervenes on the information despite the computation, because they said the computation actually gets in the way of doing any kind of consciousness, because you've got these other folks who say mathematics is more descriptive, it's not prescriptive. Like, you know, math is just a language, it's created by humans. Humans created math. You know, math doesn't create the universe. You know, we use math to describe the universe.
Yeah, I go along with that.
Yeah, that seems to make more sense to me. But you've got a lot of these materialists, they're called materialists. Their way around the hard problem is to say everything boils down to mathematics, that mathematics is fundamental. That's now the new physicalist thing. If you were to ask any academic physicalist or materialist, you'll ask him, well, what is reality? What is the fundamental basis of reality? They'll say it's mathematics, it's information, it's mathematical structure. And then, so again, people like to create maps and then believe that the maps are the territory. Like, again, this is the problem that I have with materialism and physicalism as compared to something like non-dualism or idealism.
Well,
You
where
know,
does naturalism fit in that picture? Because
nat-
I definitely identify as a naturalist.
me too.
So
So I'm
then
yeah.
there's no problem with being a naturalist and a non-dualist.
Yeah, because naturalism can fit is underdetermined. It's what you call the problem of underdetermination. So what someone would say is like, well, what's natural is mathematics. What's natural is the universe comes out of equations. And another person could say no, um, uh, uh, nature comes out of potentiality, right? Like just potential, something like that, or consciousness, or whatever, phenomenal consciousness, this field of potential, right? For every experience you'll ever see. And all of that can be described as natural. The only ones who say supernatural are going to be the theists, the ones who believe in God, because they
Yeah.
believe in things outside of the universe. They're even worse. They think that the universe, there's something outside they've never even seen, was never part of their experience. They use that to describe the things they experience, something outside of their experience. So they're very kind of similar to materialists in a odd way. In an odd way, materialists, physicalists have a lot in common with theists, because both camps are pointing something outside of what they know to describe what they know. And it just makes no sense, you know. And that's why I believe nature is just one thing. I believe nature is grounded in, reality, just what is being. Being is what is. That's really what it is. Um, Now I might be wrong. Maybe we do come from math. Maybe like a lot of these
I
folks.
like saying that doesn't rub me as real. We came from math.
Right.
That
That's what
just
they
doesn't make
literally
sense.
say that. Yeah. Look at people like Sean Carroll. He's somebody who says that out of the math comes an infinite amount of universes. It's called the multiverse.
Multiverse.
A multiverse comes out of the math. And he goes,
Yeah.
so he goes and he does the math, and he says, based on the math, we get multiverses that can explain all the fine tuning in our universe.
But isn't that giving a magical power to math?
Yeah, well, Stephen Hawking's had a problem with that. Stephen Hawking famous quote was, what breathes fire into the equations that they seek to describe? So he didn't understand, how do these equations, how do they breathe life into the universe? Like, how does something like an abstraction create anything? It's just, it comes from our mind.
Well,
It comes,
I would tend to see it like Hawkins was seeing it.
I do too. And
Mm.
it's that's the way I look at it. It's like, that's the problem I have with materialism and physicalism, is it all boils down to an abstraction. Like for example, this is something you may or may not know this already, but let's say, people go in these laboratories and they seek to do these quantum experiments, right? Our most powerful micro microscopes, or they call them, they're real highly energetic, and they can only peer down to 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. And that's as far as reality goes. After 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, if you shine any more light on it, you create a black hole. The energy and the gravity will create a mini black hole. So there, in a black hole, it's just a placeholder term that means nothing. So, you know, and that's not even far. Like theoretically, they should be able to peer farther than that. But they can only get to 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. And so beyond that, all they have is math to describe how reality emerges from that black hole sort of scenario. Like, they have the math. And so that's why they say reality comes from math. But that's just an abstraction. You know, materialism is an abstraction. It's just numbers. It's mathematics that people create
You know,
in their mind.
I couldn't find myself saying that as any definitive statement.
Right.
Like, I can't even think of myself saying that. I
See,
mean,
this,
I could say, and I would say, that's one theory. I'm
right.
comfortable saying that.
And yeah, and as a model, they have a couple different models on that. One's called the amplituhedron model, is a mathematical structure. It's geometry. They say that the math at that level is geometric shapes, and so reality comes out of geometric shapes. And then another is string theory, and what they propose is that you've got these real tiny curled up strings beyond 10 to the 33 centimeters that create all these extra dimensions that can sort of create the reality we observe as observers. None of this stuff has been proven. None of this stuff has been tested. It's not empirical. It's all math. It's all abstraction. So they're models. They're good toy models. You know, they kind of work consistently, I guess, within the models themselves. But the fact that you have so many and they all work tells you they're probably all wrong, though. Even though they all work, they could be all
I
wrong.
would say it's beyond me. Like, the discussion we're having now, I don't think I would ever have this discussion with anyone but you.
Yeah. Right. So the only thing we really know, the only thing we can really talk about knowing is that we have an experience of living as a life form, as a being. That's all we really know. That's the only thing we can talk about knowing, is that we exist. We experience existence. That's all we know. All of this other stuff is just thoughts. It's just mental masturbation at the end of the day. That's all it really is. So non-dualism is just that recognition. That's all it really is. But these people, materialists, all these religious people, they take their models too serious. They take them like they really describe the real world, just because we think of them up and because we make maps and they appear to us a certain kind of way. But even the contradiction is even worse, because a materialist, like, a lot of people will tell you that well, a non-dualist thinks that reality is just all in their head. That's not what we're saying at all. Actually, it's the materialists that are saying that, because the materialists will tell you that your brain takes in all these photons and sound waves, and when you touch the table and touch the thing, you're not really touching solidity, you're touching a quantum field. You know, atoms are 99.9999999% empty space, right? That's all it is. So you're not really touching anything. The materialists will tell you that. They'll tell you that all these photons are just processed inside your brain, and it constructs a reality for you. And this reality is constructed based on this external world. So you're not really accessing the external world, right? Ever. It's just being constructed inside your brain. And your construction as a human is going to be different than the construction of a bat or a whale or something like that, right? And I believe that a lot of that may be true. You don't have direct access to this external world. But I would say that um, if that's the case, then how are you going to now say the truth of the matter is that the outside world is, there's a contradiction? You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say that it's all constructed in your mind and then pretend like you can get outside of your mind to tell us that your abstractions are actually true, that the reality comes from math. It doesn't it doesn't make sense, you know.
Well, anyway, Scott, a very deep subject.
Yeah.
And I would say goodbye. Have a good night.
You too, man.
And,
Thank you for having me, brother.
And I'm glad you sent me something to give me something to read and spin my wheels.
Yeah, absolutely. Take a look at it. Take all the time to deconstruct it, you know.
Yeah, it's very. I find this stuff very complicated.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not
For me,
simple.
it's so weird that for me it was so complicated to wrap my head around it at first, but once it clicked, it's like the most obvious thing, like the nose on my face. It's just really weird like that, but I don't know.
We'll see if a light bulb goes off.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, man. I'll see you.
All right, brother. You have a good one, man.
Bye.